Okay, why don't we begin by having you tell us who you are and let's see, where did you serve and the years?
Go first.
I'm Hannah Kafir. I served in Lesotho in Southern Africa from 2017 to 2019 with my husband.
Yeah, I'm John Suttle. I also, 2017 to 2019, we served together.
Okay. Now, let's also right after that. Let's go back in time to your. Give me some background on each of you. So whoever wants to go first. Where were you born? When? Where'd you grow up?
So I was born in Duncan, Oklahoma, and grew up in Duncan, Oklahoma. And I guess I went to high school in Duncan, and then in college I moved to Oklahoma State, and I met Hannah in high school, and then
In Duncan?
yes, in
Okay.
Duncan, and then I don't know how detailed he wants to get yet, but yeah.
Tell me a little about your parents.
My dad is a technician at Halliburton, and
Oh yeah, that's what made Duncan famous, right?
it is.
Yeah.
That's where Earl P. Halliburton got started. So it's kind of the center of the Halliburton world in Duncan, I would say. Well, nowadays it's Houston, but before it was Duncan.
Yeah.
And then my mom is a retired school teacher, so she taught high school physical science.
All right.
And then,
I grew up in Duncan, Oklahoma, but I was born in Chickasha, Oklahoma, and lived there until I was in 5th grade, and then we moved to Duncan. And so I grew up there with my 3 little sisters and my parents, who are from Ryan, Oklahoma, and Addington.
Where? Ryan? R-Y-A-N?
Yeah. My dad is from Ryan, and my mom is from Addington, Oklahoma. And so when I was in 5th grade, we moved to Duncan, Oklahoma. I went to Duncan High School, met John in high school, and then I went to Oklahoma State University in 2010 and was there until 2014. And I got my bachelor's degree in strategic communication with a minor in French there.
Strategic communication.
Yeah.
Now, I've not heard of that one. What is
Public relations.
public? Oh,
Yeah. They made up a
that's
more...
even a public relations title for
Exactly.
it, isn't it?
That's what they did.
public relations on public relations.
Yes.
Okay. So it doesn't sound like there's anything in either of your backgrounds that would lead you to international development or development of any kind.
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing in particular. Probably nothing outside of the norm, at least.
Did you all ever even know a Peace Corps volunteer before?
Yes, so I think the main reason I got interested in it was because my dad's friend Scott Killow was a returned Peace Corps volunteer,
Oh.
and so I knew of him, and I think that was my initial interest, was kind of just hearing about the Peace Corps from him.
Did you hear from him directly?
I think so, and then also my parents mentioning that he was in the Peace Corps, and then he also did work in the Philippines while I was a child, and so hearing about that I think was kind of my initial interest. And then in college I took classes such as like a cultural geography class of the world, and was just very interested in learning about other cultures at the time. And so I think those two things are kind of what got me interested, and then I just really wanted to get a chance to make a difference in the world, I think, basically.
Yeah.
Can you remember if you had a conversation with Scott at any point about Peace Corps and tell me what it's like, level with me, I want you to tell me the truth about what you did, anything like that?
I'm not sure. I don't remember.
Probably you didn't then.
Yeah, I think we just knew that he knew Spanish really well. And we just heard stories kind of secondhand about experience, like her dad went to go visit Scott, And
Oh, he
told
did?
us a story. Yeah, told us a story about him being really thirsty, but he knew not to drink the water. And eventually he just gave in because he was just so thirsty. He just drank a little bit of water and it didn't end well.
I heard
my
that.
dad or Scott?
I think that's what your dad said. Scott,
Oh.
I think by the time Hannah's dad visited Scott, Scott kind of had water and all that figured out. But
He must have, because
Yeah.
I remember Scott telling me about that, and he was on the way out. Had a helicopter landed and taken him out of there, he would have said, yes, goodbye. He said he was never so sick, and there wasn't anybody around there to really help him. And he thought, this is it.
Yeah, well, counterintuitively, we hear a story like that, we're like, wow, that sounds like an adventure. Maybe
Yeah,
we should do something
I
like that.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
Yeah, well,
So there wasn't anybody that you knew, John, that
Well, I guess I say that. My dad worked in Mexico quite a bit, and he also knows Spanish pretty well. He's probably forgotten a lot of it, but he's, I mean, my parents are Catholic, my grandparents are Catholic, so they interact with the Hispanic community. So I guess as far as international, that's probably the extent of my experience with anything international is just the Hispanic community or Mexican Americans, and my dad would tell stories about when he traveled abroad to different parts of the world. He's been to as far as Australia, the Middle East or Southeast Asia or Southwest Asia, and different parts of the world. So
really,
yeah,
well traveled, very
yeah,
well
he is.
traveled.
And he's seen a lot of things, and so I guess his stories about his experiences abroad were interesting. I heard them growing up. So maybe I never really thought about it, but maybe that also appealed to me.
I think it
Maybe.
probably was. I mean, even if it's not on a conscious level.
Yeah. I should add that I also went on a very short mission trip to the UK in high school and met a lot of people from the Middle East while I was there, and I think I was really interested in their culture and stories, and so I think that just and then I went to college and took some of those cultural classes that I think just added to my interest in learning about other people, and I think.
Were these people from the Middle East in the United Kingdom at the time? For why?
I think they were just immigrants to the UK.
Oh, okay.
And so they just the people I was there helping on their mission work just knew several people who were there. I was in Wales, specifically Cardiff, Wales.
Okay.
And so there were just several people that were connected to the people that I was there to help, who were Middle Eastern immigrants. And so I think I just got really interested in other cultures, I think, through that experience too.
When you say mission, that's could be different things. And since you were doing the mission on Middle Eastern people, for Middle Eastern people in Wales, was the purpose of it to convert them?
I think it was at the time. I mean,
And did you
No.
think that was fine?
well, at this point,
I mean, I'm not trying to.
I will say that I am actually an atheist at this point, but at the time I was a evangelical Christian, and so at the time it was with the viewpoint in mind, I think, to convert people.
That
Yeah.
they'd be better off if they were Christians.
Yeah.
Okay.
I never went on a mission trip.
But you enjoyed the mission trip, I guess.
I
right?
enjoyed. I don't know. I think the whole time I felt like I wasn't doing a good job, like because I just wanted to talk to the people, and I never really talked about anything religious. I don't think I just talked to them about their lives and learned about them, and I think that's. I don't know. I think I remember coming back from it being excited that I had met really awesome people and feeling like I didn't accomplish anything.
It seems to be
So it's kind of interesting.
seems to be a common experience of any sort of altruistic travel. Is you think that you're going to have an impact on them, but oftentimes
It's the opposite.
it's the opposite. They impact you. So,
So it must have made you, given you the idea that that was so much fun, meeting these people and learning about them. I could do more than that. I could do more of that.
I remember so I went to a restaurant that was an Algerian restaurant, and I remember the proprietor of the restaurant teaching me how to say thank you in Arabic, which shukran, and she explained it as you shake hands and run. So I remembered that, and then I remember getting in a taxi in college in the Dallas-Fort Worth area at the airport or something, and the man said he was from Iraq, and he handed me my bag when I was getting out, and so I said shukran to him, and he was so excited that I knew how to say it, and he was like, where did you learn that from? And so I think I just kept having little experiences like that made me want to have more experiences interacting with people from around the world and just making people feel happy in some manner. So I think, just like little experiences, I think, added up.
Yeah, did I understand you right to say that you all met in high school in Duncan?
Yes.
correct.
Okay. And when you met, were you looking at the other one and thinking, yeah,
I think so.
I see a future here.
We started dating pretty quickly after meeting, I think.
Yeah. Let me see. Yeah, so I don't know. I guess I don't know.
Spit it out.
I'm trying to think. Yeah, what was it like 20 years ago? Seems like 15 years ago.
It was 16 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But you started dating pretty soon after you met.
yeah, we liked each other. I think any high school couple thinks that it's gonna last forever, but I guess in our case it happened to.
It's on the way. Yeah.
But we really liked each other.
Mm-hmm.
He was 2 years ahead of me in school, so I was a sophomore in high school and he was a senior in high school when we started dating.
So that presents a complication later on, right?
So we had a long distance relationship for a couple of years.
Yeah, while I went to Oklahoma State, I had to wait for her to meet me there.
That was the plan, though. You were going to follow him to
Yeah.
Stillwater.
It helped that my dad had gone there and like my aunts and uncle had gone there, and so I had been wanting to go there anyway. So yes, but it was really exciting when I finally got to go be in the same place as him after 2 years apart.
Well, I happen to know that there's a pretty active contingent of RPCVs in Stillwater, and has been for quite a while. They meet periodically. Did you run across them when you were in Stillwater?
I think Hannah did.
I loved going to the International Cultural Festival at the OSU campus that they had once a year, and I remember they had a table that I think some RPCVs were in charge of, and so I remember getting all their like informational booklets and stuff and talking to them and just being really excited about it while I was there.
Were you really? I mean, was this something that you were serious about, or was it just, oh, look,
I was like really wanting to do it. I think that year was when I was when Emarina was my roommate, Emarina Killo, and so since her dad was a Peace Corps volunteer, we were both kind of interested in it, I think. And so I remember I went to that cultural festival and brought all this stuff back and was telling her I was all interested in it. And I think that summer I actually went and was an intern in Washington, D.C. at the Capitol. And one of the staff members had been in Uzbekistan as a Peace Corps volunteer.
Oh.
So I remember talking to her about her experiences.
What kind of intern were you in D.C.?
I was an intern in the House Committee on Agriculture.
How'd you get that?
My dad is really involved with agriculture in Oklahoma. He works, or he's retired now, but he worked for the, what is it even called? The Oklahoma Agricultural Credit? Ag Credit? He did loans for land and farmers, and so he had a lot of connections in the agricultural community in Oklahoma, and so someone he knew, their daughter was the chief of staff for the House Committee on Agriculture, and so he sent her my resume, and she interviewed me, and so that's how I ended up working there for a summer.
And when was that?
That was in the summer of 2012.
2012.
And so I think that same year I had gone to the International Cultural Festival and talked to those RPCVs at that table, I think.
Ah.
So both those things happened that year, I think.
Okay. All right. So you're both eventually at OSU. You're still a number, right?
Mm-hmm.
There. And what are you talking about? I mean, are you talking about getting married pretty soon?
Well, we were always in a pretty serious relationship, so it was always the plan to be married.
Mm-hmm.
I think I wanted to finish college. The first step was to finish college and then get married.
Mm-hmm.
And
you finished college, but not necessarily you, Hannah. I mean,
we actually ended up,
you would eventually,
Yeah.
but
yeah.
we actually ended up finishing at the same time because he was an engineering major, and so his program took a little longer, anyway. So,
Well, it took longer for me.
well, I work in higher education now, so I know that it can take like 6 years normally for that.
So when did you graduate?
2014.
Both.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So,
And had you been thinking at that point, even before you got married, shortly before you got married, about how you would make a living? What kind of living you wanted?
well, I wanted to be a mechanical engineer. I liked the idea of automotive or aerospace or something like that, but I ended up in the oil field. And after a while, after you put out enough resumes and get rejected enough, you're what you're willing to accept, sort of.
I know it.
Yeah. But yeah, I didn't get my first choice would have been to work for NASA and build rockets or something, but eventually I guess I negotiated myself down to the oil field. So, but yeah, I just wanted to be a mechanical engineer and do something mechanical, design mechanical things, manufacture mechanical things.
And Hannah, what about you?
I majored in strategic communication, like I said. I was really wanting to do something that would be impactful with that, and so I wanted to do something with like nonprofits or government work or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up not doing that and ended up doing communications for a PR firm in San Francisco for the first 15 months of being out of my undergrad. I lived in San Francisco while he was back in Oklahoma and Arkansas, so it was another long distance moment. But so I did communications for a PR firm, and my client was PayPal for that time that I lived there. So it was like technology communication, and I was extremely bored with it and didn't find it that interesting because I felt like I wasn't making a difference in anyone's life basically, and was just doing work to make money for these corporations basically.
Yeah.
That's how I was feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And so the whole time I just kept wanting to do the Peace Corps. It was like in the back of my head just saying, I want to do the Peace Corps. Like when we get married, I want to do the Peace Corps. Because I thought about doing it by myself when I was still in college, but didn't want to go without him for that long. And so that's kind of what happened with that. I guess
Otherwise, you would have, you think?
I think I would have done it by myself if,
Yeah.
I'm sure I would have gotten there and been like, what did I get myself into? Because it's hard to imagine doing it as a single. Well, I knew plenty of single women in my cohort, but the type of issues they dealt with were a lot different than what I had to deal with because I could walk around with him and be pretty safe, whereas they would be wearing like a fake wedding ring and things like that and have to be a lot more careful than I was, I think. But I guess I could also add I studied abroad in college in France for a summer in 2013.
Well, I want to know about that.
So that also added to my interest in doing international work, I think. I was in Grenoble in the Alps area of France for a summer, and really loved doing that. Met a lot of very interesting people while I was there. So so that was. I really wanted to get to like continue learning French too. We didn't go to a country where French was, but so that was international experience again, I think.
Did you learn French passively while you were there?
Yeah, pretty
You
passively.
could converse a little bit with.
Yeah, so I had been taking it throughout college already, and then went there and took some classes and lived with a French host family. And so with them every night at dinner, it would be practicing
Oh,
French.
that's
basically.
so neat.
Yeah,
so
so
neat.
that was really interesting. And they also had Russian exchange students staying with them part of the summer who were high school Russian students. So that was really interesting to meet some Russian people. And I don't know, it was just a really interesting experience for sure. But I'm keeping up with French now by doing Duolingo all the time.
Oh,
So, yeah.
Huh. So, I think that you hadn't for sure made up your mind that you were going to join the Peace Corps when you got married. But it sounds like it was on at least the back burner, if not the front burner.
I think
Yeah.
so.
I think so. Like she was saying, she wasn't. Her job wasn't exactly her cup of tea, and as I kind of alluded to, the oil field wasn't necessarily my first choice of career. So I think that was part of what drove us to go ahead and pull the trigger and do the Peace Corps.
Yeah, I was just thinking in my own head about. It sounds like so you both weren't all that happy with what you were doing. So you need a transition.
Yeah.
Peace Corps provides a transition for a lot of people. Did you think of it in that term at all?
I think so.
Yeah, I think that we were just couldn't really foresee ourselves doing what we were doing forever. We just wanted to change the pace, and yeah, it was a transition, I would say. We also, we had interest in international. We both had a common interest in different cultures and traveling. So I guess those two things sort of came together and pushed us to join the Peace Corps.
Were there other options for you that were like Peace Corps but not Peace Corps? Did you think about other service organizations or NGOs that are out there?
I thought about one when I was in my senior year of college. I thought about doing the Teach for America. I think I thought about doing.
Teach for America?
Yeah, I think that was the name of it, right? Like I did that interview with someone, and you like go to a city in the U.S. and you're teaching there for I think a year or so. And do you remember that I was thinking about doing?
Sounds like AmeriCorps, but I guess
Maybe it was through AmeriCorps, but I thought it was called Teach for America. But so I thought about doing that, but I think I kind of read into some of the reviews and how there were just some issues around volunteers having some like difficulties with the schools they'd be placed in and not getting enough support, I think, and so I think I decided not to do it. But
I'd say you kind of had your heart set on the Peace Corps too.
that probably.
She knew about the Peace Corps, learned about it, and had the stories from Scott, and I think eventually Amarina had already done the Peace Corps, so she was a year ahead of us.
She hadn't. Well, yeah, she went a year before us. Yeah, so
Right,
I think
so
it was like she did it. And
we knew that she was. I mean, a year prior to us joining the Peace Corps, we knew Amarina was going to do it or was doing it.
Or was doing it.
Yeah.
So you didn't have really a chance to talk to her about being in Peace Corps because she was in Peace Corps when you joined. Is that right?
Correct.
Amarina,
Yeah.
Yeah.
She so we got married in June 2016, and she was leaving she left that year. So I remember not long after we got married, we went to her going away party.
Oh.
And so at that, I remember talking to Scott kind of about whether we were going to actually fill out the application, I think.
Yeah.
You talked to Scott.
Briefly, yeah, because I was saying we were interested, and I think he was saying well, if you're going to apply, you should probably apply now or something like that.
Uh-huh.
And so I think we applied pretty quickly in like December that year. So she was leaving she left in September, I guess. And so I think we applied.
16?
Yeah. So
Okay.
I think we applied pretty quickly. I think part of why we went ahead and applied is that the 2016 election happened, and for me, that it was a really depressing moment. I think just in everything that was happening in the U.S. at the time, and so I think.
Hallelujah. I know what you mean.
And so I think that was part of why we just decided to apply. I was like, everything's depressing. I want to show people that not everyone is like what the U.S. is being portrayed as necessarily right now, I think, was kind of my thinking at the time. I don't know if you remember
So
that.
it would be right to say that Trump is the one that motivated you to
Probably motivated
Get the
us
hell
to
out of here.
actually do it.
One of the factors. Maybe it was the last straw. Broke
Probably.
Camel's back.
It had all been leading up to that point, but I think why I was like, we need to fill out the application now. I think that's
Yeah,
basically what happened.
I'd say another thing is Hannah had been talking about the Peace Corps for years prior to that.
Really?
Even
Yeah.
I knew that she'd always wanted to do it, and so if she didn't do it, she would have regret not having
Yeah.
done it
Yeah.
for the rest of her life.
hmm
So that was part of what influenced us too, or what influenced me at least.
I think after we did it, or after when we applied and we got accepted, I remember talking to people that I would meet who would say, I always wanted to do the Peace Corps, but we never did it, or just even people now saying that. So,
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I'm like,
I know some too.
yeah. So I'm glad that we actually did.
Yeah.
Or sometimes most volunteers are younger, like in their 20s, but every now and then you'll see someone that's a little older. And if you ask them 9 times out of 10, they'll just be like, well, I always wanted to do it, and I'm still alive, I'm still kicking, it's not too late for me. So
Yeah.
rather than regret it their whole life, they'll regret it half their life, and then eventually
Right.
they'll
Right.
join it eventually. So I don't know, maybe we're just getting it out of the way, I guess. Get it out of the way while we're young.
So, do you remember applying and who you talked to? Was there a Peace Corps recruiter that you talked to?
After we applied, there was. So we applied, and then I think pretty quickly got like an email telling us that we had. I feel like we applied in December, and I think we had interviews at the beginning of January, and so
Whoa, that's really fast.
it felt really quick, I think. And I remember the email I got saying like, you've been selected for an interview for Lesotho, and I was like, what is that?
What
like, I
is
had
that?
no idea. I think
Is that like a
So-so.
mosquito or?
yeah. So I think that on the application I think by that point in time they had the opportunity where you could put like a region that you were interested in or
Yeah.
something, and I think we had put Africa as the region. Just because I had the French background, and so I was thinking like that was a place where some people
Sure.
spoke French.
West
But
Africa.
yeah, but
Yeah.
but I just remembered that email, and it was like highlighted in yellow Lesotho, and just thinking, I don't know what that is. And immediately I started researching it and was
course.
immediately very interested in it once
I
I
can
started.
see why.
Yeah. And
When I started looking at it the other night, I didn't really know where it was or anything about it.
Mhm.
And when I started seeing those mountain ranges, oh, wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not like the imagery you'd see in The Lion King or anything. It's completely different. Well, quite a bit different than
Yeah.
when people think of African landscape. They usually think of the savannah, but
Yeah.
Lesotho's really mountainous.
So you applied together, and it was obvious that you had to be accepted together or no deal.
Pretty
Yeah.
much.
we had I think we were talking to the same recruiter at that point, and she interviewed each of us separately, and
You
then
mean after you applied
Correct.
and you had your interview. Now,
Yeah.
tell me about that.
So we had separate interviews, and went through those, and
Where was this conducted?
they were online interviews, actually.
Oh,
so
okay.
the whole thing was conducted online through. I think they had like a specific like platform that they were using. It wasn't like Zoom or anything. It was some sort of through like the Peace Corps website or something. And so it was online. I remember sitting at my kitchen counter where I lived in Oklahoma City at the time and doing the interview on there. And then we had an interview together. So they did like a dual interview, which was interesting because I've never done like a job interview with my husband other than that.
Yeah.
And I remember I went ahead and got LASIK eye surgery. Like I'd been wanting to get it done, but I decided I wanted to have it done before the Peace Corps so I didn't have to deal with
Glasses?
Yeah, because I had pretty bad eyesight, and so it's like I couldn't really see at all hardly without glasses or contacts. And so I remember the dual interview I was going to have it like the next day or something, or I had just had it recently. I don't remember, but I remember I wasn't able to wear contacts in the interview or something. Maybe I was wearing glasses, and I never wore glasses other than at night, and so I just remember thinking I didn't look like myself in the little screen. But yeah, so that's my main memory, and then I remember we had to get our the recommendation, like referrals or whatever, or what is that called? The references.
Reference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I remember we had all our references, but somehow like one of mine was taking a while to send it. And I remember they like sent me a direct email like, can you please get your reference to get back to us? And so I remember thinking, oh, they must be interested in me if they're like needing me to get the reference.
Yeah.
And so then we got accepted, and
How long did that interview last?
the
first one?
I don't remember either. That's been,
I mean, I'm talking about 10 minutes or an hour.
I'm guessing 30 minutes.
yeah, probably
Okay.
like 30 minutes.
All right.
That's-
And when it was over, what were you thinking when the interview was over? You remember that? Like, it ranges from, oh, I screwed up, they're never going to get me, to, oh, I think I showed them.
Yeah, I don't remember it being. It certainly wasn't like a disaster. I think it was. I guess it must have been like, well, I guess that went okay.
Yeah. I
It was
feel like for me, I thought it went pretty well. I think I've definitely had interviews where I know what you're talking about, where it's I'm like, I did badly, but that one I think I did fine. I remember she had like a set list of questions that I was sent beforehand, I think, and so that was helpful to know what I was
Oh,
going to be
yeah,
talking
that
about,
certainly would be. Mm-hmm.
I think she had other questions other than that, but there were like 10 questions that we knew in advance for our interviews that we would have.
Yeah. You could plan out your answer.
A little bit, I think, so that was helpful, I think. But yeah, I think, and then I think definitely by the dual interview that it felt like it went like particularly well, I think.
Yeah, I can't really remember the interview, so I must not have had strong emotions. So I must have went all right, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you were notified that you were accepted at the same time, I'm sure.
Yeah,
right?
I think it was March. So I think the interview process started in January, and I think we found out in March.
Of 17?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's when you pronounce it Lesotho.
Mm-hmm.
I asked my phone, how do you pronounce this? And they said, Lesotho.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
What's it?
not Lesotho.
Nobody says Lesotho there?
Not
No.
in Lesotho itself. I've met people from other parts of Africa who called it Lesotho. I think I met someone from West Africa who called it that.
But the people in the country call it Lesotho.
Yes, so the country is called Lesotho, the people are called Basotho, and the language is Sesotho. So
And an individual is a Mosotho.
What does tutu mean?
I think the people are Basotho, or a person is a Mosotho.
but what
that was
what is the tutu part?
Yeah, because it's on all of those.
Yeah, I don't
So it
remember
must-
if it had a specific meaning.
Maybe it means people.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm sure that's something we can look up and
Yeah,
tell you.
yeah.
I know that Lesotho is like the land, or it roughly means like people are from, or the land of the Sesotho, I guess.
Of the Lesotho?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lesotho, that's
I don't know.
Or might, is it based off the language? Lesotho? Like people that speak Lesotho? Or Sesotho? I'm getting mixed up now.
I don't remember.
I can't quite, I can't remember exactly either.
Well, I'm wondering also if, oh, what did you think? Hannah already told me that she was intrigued and, you know, it appealed to her after she did her research. What
The
about you?
country.
Lesotho?
Yeah.
I
First of all, had you heard of it?
hadn't heard of
Okay.
it. And when I first learned that it was pronounced Lesotho, I was like, that can't be right. Somebody made a mistake. It can't be called. Why does it have an H in it? That's probably my first thought. I think it was a little less intimidating because you can, if in a pinch, you can get by knowing English in a lot of that country.
Oh, yeah.
Did you
So-
realize that almost right away? That this would be a place where they speak a lot of English?
Yeah, well, in more urban places, they speak English
Because
Yeah.
they gave us
somewhat commonly.
they
Yeah.
gave us like an informational packet pretty quickly too, and I think it said that right.
But yeah, in rural areas, you probably need to know Sesotho. So that made it a little bit less intimidating because up to that point, I was thinking, man, I'm gonna have to learn a lot of French in a short amount of time. So I think that made it less scary, I guess.
Because
No,
you
not the
weren't going to
language.
have to learn French at all.
Right.
Right.
Well, it's probably a lot harder to learn Sesotho than it is
Yeah.
to learn French,
I'll
but
bet.
you don't have to know it as well, I guess. We also learned that we would be teachers, and I don't have
Teaching teachers. Is that what you said?
No, that
Or,
would be
no.
teaching.
that we would be teaching or slash
you would be
teachers.
teaching.
Yeah. We
What would you be
teachers.
teaching? Did they tell you?
They told us, yeah, I was going to teach math, and she was going to teach English.
Oh, that was
So, yeah, they actually are learning English in school.
yeah.
So,
I think that was something that was slightly intimidating for me when I first got the information about it that I forgot until this moment, is that I was going to be teaching English to primary school children, so elementary school children, and I've never done any teaching of that young of age. I was a teaching assistant in my undergrad for college students in a writing class.
Yeah.
And so I had done that sort of thing. And then he was going to be teaching math and science to high school students.
yeah,
And so I was like,
I'm a
"Oh,
bit of
why
an
not?"
introvert, or a lot of an introvert, so it's kind of a strange thought to be thinking like I'm going to be in front of a classroom full of kids and talking every day. But yeah, I also
Did you
looked
bring
at
that
the-
up to the recruiter at any point? Or anybody with Peace Corps before you actually got in?
Well, I was probably trying to not. I was
Yeah.
trying to appeal to him, so I probably neglected to mention that I'm.
I think they mentioned that you should do tutoring, though. Remember that? Because
Oh, yeah,
you did
I
some
did.
tutoring, right?
Yeah, I tutored a homeschooled kid in math for a little bit to kind of get my feet wet. But
Once we were accepted, you were
Yeah.
doing that.
Yeah. Well, that was a smart thing to do.
yeah, it kind of helped me.
Did you
knock some-
enjoy it? This little
Yeah, I think-
snippet of helping.
It's kind of like maybe it's for an analogy. It's like cleaning your house. Nobody totally enjoys cleaning their house, I don't think, but they really like a clean house. You know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
in the moment. It
Good.
might be frustrating or difficult, but it really helps me sleep at night knowing that I helped somebody learn math because
Sure.
like I said, he was homeschooled and his parents weren't pulling as much weight as they could have teaching him, I guess. His parents weren't teaching him math very well, so knowing that I was able to step in and kind of help bring him up to speed was a good feeling. So
Oh, yeah.
knowing that I could potentially amplify that by teaching a whole class appealed to me.
Mm-hmm. So sounds like you were both quite eager to go.
Yeah, a little. mixed emotions, but overall
Well,
wanting to go.
I think you were a little stressed more so than I was, right?
Yeah, it's stressful having to move all your stuff somewhere because we had a house full of furniture.
Oh
And,
yeah, you're unlike most that I've interviewed who really didn't have anything, just took off.
Yeah. So and then we both had jobs. It was a major shift.
I think for me,
So-
I just really wanted to quit my job, and so I was like excited to get to quit my job. But you were a little more stressed about quitting your job, I think.
Yeah. Well, I'm one of those people that doesn't like to take time off work because I feel like I have work to do, a job to get done. So maybe wouldn't say I'm a workaholic, but I don't know. Maybe I am. Don't know it.
We were renting a house, but it was still like we had stuff that we were having to pack
I
up.
know that was another thing. We wanted to get our deposit back and everything too. So getting moved out and our lease was ending, and then we're joining the Peace Corps.
We had two
All that.
cats that we had to deal with.
Yeah.
Putting one with my parents, one with his parents. That was stressful.
So that transition to getting to Lesotho was pretty stressful. But
Because of your parents, more than anything else, or just the idea of wow, what a change this is going to be.
Your parents were making it a little bit stressful.
yeah, my parents weren't, or at least my dad wasn't real crazy about me going to the Peace Corps.
For 2 years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he I don't know. He was. I guess he didn't quite understand why somebody would want to go live like a poor person in a poor country, in a poor community.
I know, and if you don't get it, you don't get it, and it seems crazy.
Yeah.
Are you out of your mind?
Yeah. I kind of think of it like camping. Camping doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense if you don't understand camping.
Yeah.
You're like,
if you
why
don't
wouldn't
understand.
you want to sleep in an air conditioned house on a nice soft bed with running water or a fridge full of food? Why would you go sleep in the dirt?
I don't have
Among the
much in
mosquitoes.
common with anybody that thinks like that.
Yeah. So if somebody asked me why I would do something like that, I kind of make that analogy. It's like, well,
Did your friends ask you that? Any of them? Did they look at you and say, "What? You got a good job. What are you doing? You're married."
I think that's what your dad said.
yeah.
I don't think any of our friends
I
acted
think
that way.
before we went, people didn't really want to insult me, but like if they said that, like if I'd already decided that I'm going, they probably didn't want to say something like that because they would think it would be insulting. But since I've been back, I told people I joined the Peace Corps and did the Peace Corps. They, like, wow, why? what made you do that?
Huh?
And then I usually tell them about the camping analogy.
Yeah. Might as well.
It's kind of it's the I don't know. That's the closest thing I think.
I don't think I've ever really had that experience. I think everyone I've talked to has always been very, interested and in awe of it, or maybe they did something similar. Before I went, all of my friends already knew that I was wanting to do the Peace Corps for a long time, and so I think they were just all like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you're finally doing it," type thing.
Yeah.
And then people I meet now, because I work in higher education. I just got my master's in higher education administration, so I work in a dean's office, doing advising type work. And so most people I meet have potentially done something like that, or they think it's really interesting. So I think it's less that type of experience.
Usually the people that ask me why, it's from a place of just inquiry, I guess. They're not really, well, what's wrong with you? Why did you do that? It's more like, that's what inspired you to do that?
Uh-huh.
More of a tone.
Yeah.
They're not.
So then, where were you going to train? In country?
Yes. We went
But did
there.
you have from talking to other RPCVs, it seems like they spend some time in DC or someplace like DC and have several days and then they fly to their country. Is that what you did, or did you just fly from
No, we
Here to there.
met our cohort in D.C., but that
Philadelphia.
Philadelphia.
It was like
Oh,
a
it was
weekend.
only-
A weekend thing.
Yeah, only a day. It was Philadelphia, but it was
Okay.
only for.
2 days, I think.
Was it 2 days?
Yeah, we flew from Dallas Fort Worth to Philadelphia, and I think we got there on a Saturday. And so we had all day Saturday there and had kind of orientation, I would call it, in a hotel in Philadelphia. And then wasn't it 2? Was it not 2 days? I thought it was, I don't know. It was either all day Saturday and all day Sunday, and then we left in the middle of the night on Sunday, or it might have been 1 day. But
You seem to remember better than I do. I just
it was
remember
basically
being in
over the weekend, and then we left.
Yeah.
But it wasn't, you said your cohort. How many were in your cohort?
Was there 55 or something like that? Does that sound about right?
Maybe.
And
There were 2 groups in our cohort. There was the education group and then the health group. So
Okay.
at the time, Lesotho had health and education as their areas, and so the health group was a lot smaller, right? Like maybe there were like 20 of them,
Yeah.
and then there was our group, so maybe about 50 or so.
50, give or take.
50 in education?
I think
In
probably
both.
Or
in both,
50.
in both
Oh,
health
okay.
and
All right.
ours. Yeah, so maybe there were like 30, about 30 of us, and then about 20 of them maybe.
Yeah.
Because we were in education and then health. But we were there together in orientation and then went to Lesotho together. And then once we got there, we were in 2 separate communities, basically, training. And then we would come
Health
together.
in one
Yeah.
and education in the other.
Yes, correct.
So there would be like 30 of you in one community?
So for the education community, we had 2.5 months of of the training, and so in the education community, we had 3 villages within this community, and so we were in the largest of the 3 villages, and then there were the other 2 villages, and those other 2 villages would come into our village, and we would all all the education volunteers would train together in this building that was part of a primary school that was in that village.
I want to ask this because of a memory I have myself, personal memory, that when I landed in Manila to start my Peace Corps service, we were put on a bus, an open air bus, and bussed through a lot of metropolitan Manila to get to the hotel we were staying in. And that bus trip was something I will never, ever forget. I was shocked. I was absolutely not prepared for what I was seeing, feeling, and smelling. Now, tell me about your experience landing there.
Well, we were very tired because it's a 17-hour flight, and we had to get up at
It's like 15 hours.
15 hours flight. Well, maybe 17 hours.
We
of travel
flew from
time.
New York City to Johannesburg, South Africa.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
And then another one.
yeah, we were up at 2 a.m. when we set out for Lesotho. So,
Oh, boy.
and then nobody. Well, I don't sleep very well on planes, so I remember just being extraordinarily tired. But we were met by country director. Was that his title?
Yeah.
Yeah, a guy that's a little higher up at the in-country for the Peace Corps. He greeted us, and then there were some volunteers from the cohort ahead of us that greeted us, and then they took us on a bus ride.
From the airport in Lesotho, in the
Yeah.
capital, Lesotho.
Right, and
That's the bus trip I'm talking about
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah.
Did that have what kind of impact, if any, did it have on you, that bus ride? You're seeing it for the first time.
I remember trying to kind of. I was interested in seeing outside, but I was also so tired. I was like, everything I'm seeing is interesting.
I'm kind of thinking of 2 bus rides because we had that one from the airport to we were staying at like a little bed and breakfast type place kind of outside the capital. And so I remember that bus ride, I remember just being exhausted. and there was a current volunteer who was just talking to us the whole time, and I was just like, I don't even know what she's saying hardly because I was so tired. And I do remember
that's
looking
too
out.
bad.
I do remember looking outside and thinking like it wasn't necessarily maybe what I had expected it to look like. I think it was colder than I expected it to be.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that it was there in the southern hemisphere, so they're on the opposite of what it was. So it would have been like late summer, early fall in Oklahoma where we were coming from, and then getting there it was spring, but I think I was expecting it to be warm spring, and I got off the plane and it was cold and and I was sleepy, and so I just remember thinking that, and everything was kind of brown, I think.
Brown?
Because it was early spring, so nothing had turned green yet at all, and so I think I didn't really expect it to look like that.
I think I was just kind of taking it in. It's like this, just trying to think of what it looked like and what the people looked like and sounded like, and you know what the cars looked like, and just trying to, or just kind of taking it in, just like this is gonna be my life the next couple of years. So.
The thing for me is that we showed up at this bed and breakfast, and we were like gonna take a nap, I think, and so we took a nap kind of. And we only had like one suitcase. Our other suitcase hadn't arrived. And so I think that was stressful. Yeah. But I think I woke up from the nap, and we had been told before arriving that this bed and breakfast we were staying at was like nice. And it was like, don't get used to like the accommodations there, basically. Because like where you're going to be staying permanently won't be as nice. And so I think like getting there, and it wasn't like a bed and breakfast that would be here in the United States. Like it was more like a rural type area outside the capital city, and I think I just was like suddenly very shocked and like got really freaked out, I remember, and was like, what did I do? Why am I doing this? Was this a bad idea? I remember he was like taking a nap, and I was sitting on the bed just like very upset that I'd like made this decision. And I remember I got a notebook out and I wrote down every single big like moment that was going to come. Like, okay, we're doing this, we're going to be sworn in, we're going to finish training, we're going to start teaching, and like this will be the halfway point. And I had all of them written out, and like kind of helped me like, okay, like you have this 2 years, you can make it to each of these specific points on the timeline. And so I remember looking at that at the end and being like, oh, you made it through it. But after that, we stayed there one night, and then we had a bus ride to the villages we were staying in. And what I remember about that bus ride is just being really interested and looking out the window. I think I had more sleep at that point. And I remember seeing little kids running along and waving at us because we were in a big like tour bus. And I remember that was really interesting to me, that they were like excited.
The kids in the country tend to be really interested in a busload of white folks.
Sure.
So it felt a bit like a celebrity. But whether that's a good thing or not, I don't know. But.
Which is how we felt when we got to the airport too, because they like led us into this lounge at the airport in Lesotho, I think, and just had us sit down in this lounge. I never like sat in anything like a lounge at an airport like that, like as like a special guest or anything.
Yeah. I guess we're really lucky in Lesotho, or the people, the Basutu are really appreciative of the Peace Corps and really enjoy having the Peace Corps there. So,
how long has the Peace Corps been there? You know,
since a long time.
Wasn't it like 75 years or something or was it 50 years? They had an anniversary. While we were there, there was a big anniversary of Peace Corps having been in Lesotho.
Is it the longest continuous run of Peace Corps?
I'm not sure.
Or something?
It was like
in the world, that can't be.
It was like 50 years or something like that.
Oh, well, that's a long.
Because it was like they had a big like event halfway through where it was like an anniversary of the Peace Corps having been there a very long time, and so they had lots of dignitaries and things for Lesotho, and you got like a U.S. ambassador and stuff that came for this big event in 2018. I think it was. It was like halfway through our service, the end of December 2018. But so I feel like it was maybe 50 years, but it was a long time, whatever it was.
I can look it up. it's there somewhere.
It's some special year that would be meaningful, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they've been there a long time. So there's a legacy of Peace Corps being in Lesotho.
And so you were, sounds like warmly welcome.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I was getting at. Is we felt really welcomed, and all
No,
people
that's-
were really kind to us. And if we told them we were in, if they asked us who we were, we could tell them by talking about Peace Corps. We're volunteers in the Peace Corps, and they would know all about it already.
On that bus ride to your community, when you'd stop, did the kids come out and try to sell you things?
No, it's usually the opposite. They usually ask us for candy or change.
Well, the adults would try to sell us things though too.
Oh.
Yeah. Like in like a bus stop. But I don't
Yeah,
know.
other street people on the.
Yeah, selling things.
Okay.
But I don't think kids usually sold. I don't know.
Kids trying to sell? I don't. Not really.
Kids
I mean,
usually
maybe
want
like
candy from you. Is what you're
It
saying.
depends on how small a kid. I think like a teenager might be trying to help their parents at their.
Oh yeah,
roadside.
that's what I was
Yeah.
thinking,
Yeah.
because that was true in the Philippines. Kids would come, they'd have little whatever they could get to try to sell you for money because they needed the money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. A lot
Weird.
of people would grow vegetables and sell vegetables. Like there was a lot of cabbage. They grew
Cabbage was their.
huge
Cabbage.
cabbage as big as basketball.
It was huge. These huge cabbages.
There's a lot of people selling cabbage or vegetables or
Little
What do you call it?
snacks and things.
what was that stuff called? Swiss chard,
Oh, yeah,
which is a leafy green.
Oh,
And
okay.
well, there's a lot of people that sold
Mm-hmm.
food. They grow and sell food.
Sure.
Yeah.
Um,
There was kind of a weird cultural thing there where I guess a lot of Mormons from the U.S. will go to Lesotho and they like give out money to like little kids or something or
Mormons
candy.
will give out money to the...
That was kind of what we heard from
Huh.
people, and so when you would be walking down the street, you would have little kids run up to you and ask you for money or ask you for candy, and so that was kind of something that was hard to get used to at first. But that was kind of what we heard, that there was like this other group, I guess, of Mormon people that did that, and so the little kids were just assuming that that's what we were doing.
Oh,
We were
yeah.
like, we don't have any of that.
Oh, I see. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, we gave them things they didn't appreciate as much as candy, like trying to teach them English or.
So what about your training now? What was it like? How long did it last? And were you all together, all of you education people, for X number of weeks before you went to your assignment?
It was 11 weeks.
11 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you were all together.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me about it.
We were so we had everyday training at this, like school, and it was like inside their like auditorium type room.
Mm-hmm.
And, so we would get up and have breakfast with our host family that we were staying with for 11 weeks. We lived in a, like a little house on their compound, basically. And so we had like our bed and all of that in there, and then we would eat meals in the main house with our host mom and her children. And her husband worked in South Africa, actually, so it was just our host mom, so our May is how you say mom or like Mrs. in Sesotho.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would just call her our May. And so we would eat breakfast in there with them, and then we would go to the school, which was like a, I don't know, 10 to 15 minute walk probably. And one of the hardest things to get used to was the elevation, because in Lesotho the elevations are all over 4,000 feet. So
All
yeah.
over 4,000
Yeah,
feet. Wow.
it's considered the highest lowest point in any country. So like their lowest point is the highest lowest point, basically, of any
Okay.
country. So that was hard for us to get used to, and we would just.
So what's the elevation where you're training?
I think it was about
Probably
5,000,
55,
55
5,000,
to
55.
5,500.
So
yeah.
like Denver.
Yeah.
Probably.
That's. I didn't really think about it that way when I was there. But
No,
yes.
I'll bet you didn't.
But yes, it was high, so that was hard to get used to because Oklahoma is not very high elevation compared to that.
No, and when you are at 5,000 feet, are you surrounded by mountain ranges that are higher than that? Or not?
A lot of like plateaus. sort
Yeah.
of.
Oh, plateaus.
So it's
Oh.
yeah, it's more like you're up on top of that height already, I guess, and then you've just got plateaus all around you.
Okay.
Part of the country does have higher mountain ranges, but that wasn't the part that we were staying in.
Okay.
Yeah, but there's almost always a plateau that's towering over you everywhere
Yeah.
you go in Lesotho.
Yeah, it's never just flat there. It's always something like plateaus.
So when you were there training, it was pretty cold, would you say?
Cold and rainy was kind of how it was. So I remember being glad that I brought my coat with me.
Yeah, I'd say the first couple of weeks. It's probably my memory not serving me well, but it seems like the first couple of weeks in Lesotho were the most wet, rainy weeks
That we had the entire
time.
I think we did have. I think the next spring was actually even wetter. Not long after that, but yeah, it was really wet and
Yeah.
cold.
It seemed rainy when you had to walk for 15 minutes in the rain every
Oh,
Up
really?
up
Or
a
every
hill,
day.
down a hill. Like it was actually the way that like my parents described going to school as children. We had to walk up and
Yeah.
down the hills. And it's like, well, that's how it was there. And so we would go there at, for training. I think our training started at like what 8 or 8:30 in the morning, something like
Yeah,
that.
I believe so.
And so we had, first thing in the morning, we would have training with our language counselors. So they had local Lesotho who were called the LCFs, the Language and Cultural Facilitator, yeah. And so they would teach us, we were like assigned to different ones in little small groups of four volunteers. And so we would learn language and culture from them every morning.
Now, was the language that the 4 groups would learn, was it all the same, or were these 4 different languages?
It was all the same. They just wanted us to be split up small so that we were
Sure.
in more of a one-on-one.
Manageable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, give us some idea of this language. I mean, was it in terms of difficulty for you, in terms of dissonance, whatever?
I found it really difficult, but I'm almost monolingual. But yeah, I think if you know more than one language already, it's almost like a muscle. If you know 2 languages, it's a lot easier to learn a third. If you know a third language, it's a breeze to learn the fourth. But I knew English and like a little bit of Spanish, so I found it to be really tough.
It's definitely very different from any language that I had learned previously because so I knew English and then I learned French and then I had taken 1 Spanish class, I think. But so it was very different, but for me at the same time, learning the grammar was a little bit easier than I expected maybe because it was actually made into the written format of Sesotho was created by French missionaries in the late 1800s, actually. So some of the forms of grammar were kind of similar to French, even though the language itself is completely different. But they had kind of created some of the... So, for example, TH in Sesotho is pronounced T, so that's the same as in French. So some of the pronunciation was, I don't know, kind of done similarly, I guess. And then, so that was kind of...
say Li is D.
Oh yeah,
So,
which is nothing like French,
yeah.
but the vowels, some of the vowels were pronounced similarly, I guess. Not O's. O's are pronounced oo, like
I'd
in
say the
Lesotho.
first step is to learning it is to try to get the grammar down, or the phonics down, I guess.
Yeah.
So when you're
Pronunciation.
reading the book, you know how to say the words you're reading.
Yeah, so
Did your facilitators tell you that it is essential that you learn this language? You're not going to be able to succeed here if you don't learn the language?
They they weren't that drastic. I think they just taught us as much as they could, and the people that picked up on it really well, they ended up in the more rural places because that's where you really need to know it.
it kind of how well you learned it kind of helped pick where you were going to be in the country.
Oh, okay. So they had not already selected where you were going at all.
Well, technically they had for us because we were the only couple.
Yeah.
And so they had one house, but we didn't know that. They didn't tell us that. But halfway through, I don't, like, not very far into our time there, we were told, you're going to be in a specific location because you're a couple, and so we only have one place for you. And so we want you to reach out to the people you're going to replace just so that you can learn, like, basically.
Oh, you were going to replace somebody.
Yeah, so
Oh.
it was, I guess they wanted us to be able to get in contact with the couple so that, because they didn't have anyone to train us specifically on what it was like to be a couple there, I guess, so they wanted us to talk to them.
Yeah.
And so we reached out to them pretty quickly into it. It was like,
Yeah.
I don't know, like 2 weeks in or 3 weeks in, we were in contact with them.
Yeah. Also, what's fun is if you know somebody's going to be replacing you, and it's going to be a married couple, you can learn who's going to replace you before they even get on the plane to come see
That's
you.
how it
Oh.
But
worked
they
out
have no
later.
idea.
Huh.
But it's,
They were like, oh, we're replacing you? We didn't know that.
but back to the language thing, there were some things that they really kind of emphasized. Like, you have to be able to say, I want that. So when you go to the
Yeah.
shop, you can ask for something.
Particularly
And
about
travel.
yeah,
Travel is like-
traveling.
I want off, or
Like,
I'm going here.
Yeah.
It's-
So a lot of key phrases.
yeah, a lot of key phrases were essential. Like, you had to know that.
Yeah.
I think-
Cab drive, or
yeah.
they were light cabs.
Kind of the
Yeah.
way they emphasized learning Sesotho was that if you learn this language, it's going to make your service a lot more impactful because you will be able to interact with people and build relationships more easily if you know the language really well. So that was kind of, I think, the motivator they were using.
So were they also giving you the impression that people, by and large, in the community were not going to be bilingual?
Kind of. I think it, like, people who were educated people in Lesotho are bilingual, but people who are, like, driving the minibuses and things like that are not necessarily going
Farmers.
to be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Farmers and people selling things in shops are not necessarily going to be, and on the side of the road are not necessarily going to speak English.
Yeah.
So that was kind of I would say what they told us, right? Kind of.
Yeah.
So if you want to
So-
talk to more people, more in depth, you got to learn the language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also teaching a lot of children don't necessarily know English right away already. And so it's more helpful to know the language so that you can actually interact with those children and get them to, I mean, teaching English to a child who doesn't know English already is going to be hard if you don't also know their language. So that's kind of...
I'm also wondering if a lot of parents that you met started teaching English to their children early in life because they thought this is a path to success.
I think some of
English. And if you
Yeah.
don't do it and you have no English, it's going to be harder for you to succeed.
I think the ones who were
Is that true or
educated
not?
parents probably thought that way.
Yeah. It's with some people. Some people it was, some people it wasn't. I also ran into people that preferred not to speak English. They preferred to speak Sesotho because they were proud of their heritage
Yeah.
and proud of their language.
Certainly.
Yeah.
And they're like, Basotho are as good as anybody else. Why should we have to speak another culture's language? So,
Mhm.
I mean, and then, the whole range between those two mindsets.
Where were most people in that range?
Probably
In your experience.
Probably in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time, we know English. We'll speak English if we need to. We also know Sesotho, so we'll speak Sesotho where we
Yeah.
need to.
I think
No one
most,
had real strong opinion, or most people didn't have real strong opinions one way or the other.
I think
would
most
say.
people I remember talking to spoke both languages because I interacted with a lot of teachers because most of the people we were working around were teachers and they spoke Sesotho and spoke English.
Yes.
And so that was kind of, they would talk to each other in Sesotho and then teach in English and then talk to me in English, and that's kind
So
of how
English
it
is the medium of instruction
happened. Yes.
in the
Yeah.
country,
Yes.
right?
Mhm. And
Yeah.
of business too, like,
Business and sometimes in government.
yeah.
I'd say.
Okay.
Not always in government, but some.
All right.
But then the lingua franca, I guess is how you say that, is the language they're learning at home is Sesotho.
Everyone speaks Sesotho at home,
Yeah.
I would say.
Well, I was going to ask that specifically. Yeah. What do they speak at home?
Mm-hmm.
Lesotho 99% of the time, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's giving me a real good idea. Then.
But the whole country is surrounded by South Africa, and in South Africa they speak many languages, but oftentimes Afrikaans or English. So if you're going to South Africa, which most people in Lesotho go to South Africa somewhat frequently, if you go too deep into South Africa, at least you're probably going to have to know English at some point.
Because they won't know Sesotho, so
Yeah,
it's
you'll run out of Sesotho speakers if you go over the border too far.
Yeah.
Mm.
There's about 7 million, right? About 7 million Sesotho speakers. There's 2 million Basotho in Lesotho. And then surrounding Lesotho, there are people in South Africa who are called the Sotho there, I guess.
Southern Lesotho?
Yeah, in South Africa it's the same language, but they call it a slightly different name. They call it Southern Sotho in South Africa. But so there's people in South Africa who speak it, but once you go outside that area, there won't be as many. They'll be speaking a different language.
What do the people who live there think generally about South Africa? Do they regard it as just a foreign country? And
Kind of. They probably don't have a real favorable view of it because of the history of apartheid.
Mm-hmm.
There were some older people that were our language and cultural facilitators that told us stories about. One that really sticks out to me is the person would have their dog in the front of the truck and make the white folks ride in the back of the pickup and have the dog in the front. And I was like, man.
Wait, there was a white driver in South Africa?
Yeah, a white driver would have his dog in the front and make the Basotho ride in the back. Or I don't know if it was Basotho, but black people ride in the back.
black people. Okay.
So they might have memories like that.
Mm-hmm.
In my experience, there's still, it's kind of hard to give a specific example, but there's kind of a lot more tension in South Africa.
Yeah.
Because
toward Lesotho?
Toward people,
just race relations,
like, between the races in South Africa, there's a lot of tension right over the border. So like you're in Lesotho and everyone for the most part gets along with one another. Like
the history of Peace Corps being there. So when they see white folks, they're with Peace Corps and they're here to help teach us, and or maybe they're Mormons giving the kids candy.
And then the Basotho get along with one another mostly too.
But when you go to South Africa, it's more of there was apartheid. In the up to 92 and
94
or 94, 92, 94,
the 90s.
Into the 90s.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of racial tension just in South Africa, but once you get into Lesotho, you can almost take a breath because it's
they don't have that.
There's no tension.
The history, well,
there's also no white people.
Yeah, so they
very few,
Yeah.
So and Lesotho also wasn't colonized in the same way that South Africa was. They were a protectorate of Great Britain, so they had white people who came there and did some colonizing type activities, but they didn't have a direct colonizer in the way that South Africa did. So there's also a lot less tension because of that.
That's a good point.
Yeah. And so the people there, I think they're just a lot happier than people in South Africa because they don't have that horrible history as much, and so they've got like a really proud like Basotho history that they've had for over 100 years of their kings. And
it might be counterintuitive to most people, but Lesotho's a lot poorer. They don't have as much.
A lot poorer than what?
South
Africa. Yeah.
Okay.
They're a lot poorer than South Africa, but they seem to be happier.
Yeah.
It's just the atmosphere is people are cheerful and smiling, and
they're very happy because they're happy to see.
Yeah, everyone greets everybody.
Anyone, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, how neat.
Yeah.
But in South Africa, it's almost a different world.
Yeah, it's like they have like they have a whole bunch of political parties in Lesotho, so there's tension between their political parties, but there's not like the type of tension where you go to South Africa and it feels like people are just upset and angry because there's so much history there that goes into why people feel the way they feel.
So there's no political violence in Lesotho?
Not really. There's like some gang violence between some rival gangs a little bit, but not
everywhere.
but other than that, not really. Like you can like during the day in Lesotho, pretty much you can be walking around and it's generally very comfortable and safe. There's like at night, it's not, which is similar to walking around here in a big city. Like you have to be careful, obviously, but
I'd say theft and robbery, stuff like that is definitely the
yeah, what
biggest
happens there?
crime problem in Lesotho.
What is robbery?
Robbery or theft,
Yeah.
taking things, stealing.
Which
Yeah.
I think is just because they have poverty there, and so people are hungry, and so they're stealing. It's kind of goes
Kinda
together, I guess, where they're
trying to meet an unmet need of some
Yeah.
sort.
Are these political factions all trying to vie for power so that they can institute a better way of life? Or
I would say so. I think
Yeah,
there's some.
it's they have a lot of trouble with corruption in
It's-
Lesotho.
Yeah.
So
I think it's similar to a
it-
lot of countries where they have like people vying for power, and so there ends up being corruption, and then the people at the poor level kind of get left out of getting the money for their needs.
yeah,
yep.
There's also some issues with some outside influences. I think like China is building a lot of roads there, and so there's been some
Really?
yeah, and so I think there's been some issues with like the textile. The biggest industry there, aside from agriculture, is textiles, and I think the textile other than there's like a diamond industry too, but basically all these industries are owned by outsiders, and so I think there's some
China
issues.
own a lot of them?
China, and then like are there some U.S. companies owning? Like who owns the diamond industry there?
I'm sure there's diamond mines owned by people all over the world. I
Yeah.
don't really know.
So it's
Uh-huh.
kind of so like Lesotho aren't really owning their own industry, which is an issue in a lot of Africa. But so that I think kind of contributes to some of the poverty issues.
So even though
there.
it's their country, they're working for other people
Correct, yeah,
who are not host country nationals.
yes,
yeah.
Yeah.
but
I
they're
remember
all
hearing about
yeah.
they have a lot of sheep there, and so they'll shear the sheep and sell the wool. And I remember there being some sort of political issue with cheapest place or the best place to sell your wool was a Chinese company, and it was basically getting their wealth out of their own country, taking the wealth out of their country.
It's like
Yeah.
modern colonization happening there, I guess, basically.
Okay. Well, let's go to your assignment now.
Okay.
After training is over and you're headed to your assignment, what is it? Where was it?
We went to Maseru district. So Lesotho has districts kind of similar to our states.
Mm-hmm.
And ours was Maseru district, which is where the capital is located. And so we were in a village called Morija, which is located about an hour south of the capital of Maseru. And we were both teaching. So I was...
I was going to say it's center west of the country.
Center West.
So, yeah.
Okay.
And-
And how small a
Middle
place
West.
is this?
It's a...
Pretty small.
Pretty small.
It's they had like one church, a couple of stores, small stores, and a bunch of roadside places.
1,000 people?
Was it?
Maybe about that much.
Yeah,
It's not very big.
had a lot of students, but as far as residents living there, probably something like that.
Yeah, we could walk through pretty much the whole village, if we just wanted to go for a walk.
Was it your understanding that you were going to be there for the balance of your time?
Yeah. So once we got there, that was our permanent assignment for the rest of the time. So we were there from December. So when we got to Morija, we were there December 2017 until we left Lesotho when we finished in November 2019. So that was our understanding, that was where we'd be staying.
Okay. And you would be teaching in a little school.
I was teaching in Morija Primary School, so an elementary school of students who are from the age of like kindergarten age until 7th grade. And so my school was pretty big. I mean, it was for Lesotho that was considered a big school, but the town was small, the village was small. But,
What was your school made of?
um,
Brick or
Cinder blocks.
cinder blocks.
cinder blocks?
So it's cinder blocks, and then on the outside is that like adobe that they put over it? What is that?
Probably just kind of mortar.
Like, yeah, so they'll
Or
make
a
cinder
grout.
blocks. Yeah, and then it's all covered with like a mortar, and that's kind of how all the buildings are there too, for the most part.
Yeah, if it's a relatively new building, it would be made out of cinder blocks.
Yeah, and in Lesotho, it's free to go to school up till 7th grade, and so all of my students were at school for free, paid for by the government, and many of them were at the poverty level in Lesotho for my school. So a lot of the students were coming from kind of long distances in the morning. They would walk pretty far from really rural areas. So a lot of my students lived in rural villages outside of my village, and then some of them were in the village. So I guess that's maybe why it was kind of a big school, because they were coming from outside of the village.
Consolidated.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yeah. So it was like an open school, like there were classrooms, but all the classrooms had doors that were left open and windows that were left open. And so you just walked around, and the classroom building would have one classroom connected to another classroom, and they would both have doors. So it'd be like little rows of buildings that had classes in them, basically.
Okay.
And you just walked around to go to the classroom that you were in outside. And you'd be walking through like grass and dirt to get to your building. And then, like I said, it was all open, so like it was air.
What was your class size?
So the first year it was a class of probably 35 students, but then we had some teachers missing the next year, and so my class was like 50 students. So
How many?
50, so they were really
that's
big.
getting up there.
So there were some big class sizes for sure. So that was like the hardest thing for me was classroom management.
So you're teaching English to 50 now?
Yeah, so that was... So the second year I actually kind of changed. It kind of changed how I was teaching. So it was more... They had me start... My co-teacher had me just do phonics with the students. So I was teaching them like English pronunciation and phonics for like one lesson basically. And then going to other classes to do what's called life skills with them.
Did you and your co-teacher have a consensus about how to do this, or were you just following orders from the co-teacher?
We had a consensus, I would say, the second year. The first year I was kind of just doing what she told me to do. So the first year I was teaching directly out of the English curriculum for 5th grade. I was teaching 5th grade. And so I just followed what the book, like the textbook said, and then taught when she told me to, and would get up and teach, and she'd be in there with me sometimes, and sometimes she wouldn't be. She was like the vice principal my first year, and so she would have other duties she had to go do. And so it was a little bit less of a co-teaching situation the first year. And but luckily that was when the classroom was a little bit smaller. But the second year, I kind of set up like a particular plan with that teacher. Like, you're going to be here too, right? And she agreed that we were going to be teaching phonics together. So we would be standing together teaching this class of 50 students phonics. So.
Okay.
So, yeah, our school, I taught at a place called Maresia Girls School. So it was an all-girls high school or secondary school. And the classrooms were probably pretty similar to, or they were pretty similar to Hannah's. There's individual cinder block rooms. I think the class sizes were probably 35, 40 students. And I taught I taught math and physics. I ended up teaching
physics,
it's physical science, but it was called physics. See, I co-taught with a couple of student teachers that were teaching there. A guy named Charles. We taught physics together, and then there was another student teacher there. We helped. We taught math together, which was kind of helpful to see how people in that culture were used to learning.
Yeah.
And see what worked for them.
Was it rote memory? Is that how they learned, or was it inductive, or
what they were used to is they had a notebook, and then we would write problems on the board, and they would copy them into their notebook and write it out that way.
Write out the answers?
or
You
they
have-
would they would work out the problem. They'd write the problem statement down or whatever.
And this is
And-
high school, did you say?
Yes, high school. Let's see, what would be Form A to Form D? It would have been basically 8th grade to 12th grade.
And were there no boys because the boys had decided they were through with schools?
No, it was just historically an all-girls high school. It just for whatever reason.
Always been this way?
always
and
been
always will.
Pretty much. But I guess in some ways that, I don't know if it made it, I guess it made it easier because high school boys, having been a high school boys, I can speak from experience, aren't necessarily the most reasonable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. The 7th grade boys weren't the most reasonable
Yeah.
at my school.
So having girls there, I'd say the girls were a little more sneaky, but I would prefer that to just out of control high school boys. So I think my job was easier since it was an all girls school because they were a lot more rational and reasonable, I think, than the high school boys. Just on
Were
the
your
whole.
students very interested in what you could tell them about kids their age in the U.S.?
Yeah.
Very
I
interesting.
I tried. Or we both did a. Didn't you do the pen pal thing?
I did pen pals between. So my sister
Oh.
is a 4th grade teacher here in the Oklahoma City area, and so her classes and my classes would do pen pals.
Oh, neat.
Yeah.
Very neat.
That was fun.
Yeah. So
And did you do this electronically?
We did it by taking pictures of it. So like we would send. So my kids would write out the note on a piece of paper, and then I would take a picture of every single one and send it to my sister, and then she would print them all out, and then she would do the same thing with me, and then I would print them out by. How did I print them out at the Peace Corps office?
my high school had a little bit of electricity in the library and a couple of the rooms, and they had a printer there.
Is that
Probably.
what it is? I don't know.
Not
Either
sure.
at his school or at the Peace Corps office, I would print off all the letters for them.
It must have been both.
Yeah.
No, what a
So they my students loved that. That was one of their favorite things to get
That's
to write.
also part of our job as Peace Corps volunteers is to try to how's it phrased?
Was that the third goal or the second goal to create relationships between?
Yeah, basically to teach Americans about Lesotho and Lesotho about
right.
So the pen pal project kind of was doing that. So that was one of the
great.
most fun things was doing that.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
I think when they think of the U.S., they think of it as being like a rich,
Sure.
really well-off country,
And everybody's rich.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which I mean, in part they're right because if you go to Lesotho, you can buy
Yes.
you can buy a Coke for like 50 cents. So if you just transplant an American to Lesotho, they would be rich comparatively, generally.
But they kind of learned about how like there's like people here who have more money than other people here, kind of through talking about that.
Did your students, Hannah, seem really incentivized about learning English, or was this just something they had to do?
I think some of them were really interested in learning English, but I think most of them probably just thought like this is what we have to do. I think.
Mm-hmm. Same thing for math. Just got to do this.
Unfortunately, in Lesotho, there's the whole stigma like girls aren't good at math, and I think when you internalize something like that, it's kind of hard to get past that. So I don't know. I did my best to try to make math fun and try to give them real world examples of when they would use a math problem. Like a lot of girls wanted to be nurses, so I would try to show them how math could be used in nursing. I can't really think of a specific example, but wherever I could think of a real world application, that's what I tried to do. But yeah, they didn't really like math, and had always been told they're not good at it because they're a girl. So
Did you deal with that head on or not? That's hogwash, in other words.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I can't recall a specific instance, but I tried to tell them that they can do it and tried to build their confidence. Uh,
Gender
So-
really plays no role in your ability to learn math
yeah,
unless you let it.
yeah. I tried to tell them that there's no reason they couldn't be good at math. They couldn't be an engineer or
Mm-hmm.
whatever they wanted to do.
Didn't you have some students who wanted to be engineers?
Sometimes they wanted to be an engineer, but I don't know if they totally knew what an engineer did.
A lot of
But-
them wanted to be nurses, right?
Yeah, oftentimes wanted to be nurses or a doctor or engineer. Trying to think of the common things they wanted to be. But I tried to build their confidence and tell them that they could do all those things and show them how math could help them do whatever they wanted to do.
And your co-teachers were on board with this?
Yeah, I guess they didn't oppose it. So
They didn't stand up and say, John is wrong.
right. I can't say that I never heard them say one way or the other, or I don't remember them saying one way or the other.
So they didn't,
So
they
hopefully-
didn't really
Hopefully they,
support you. They just let you go on.
well, I don't know. I think I had the hang of teaching, so I would watch them teach, and they would kind of they might help students while I was teaching or something like that. So
Mhm.
they would be going around the room helping students with problems while I would teach, or maybe vice versa. Or trying to think what all kind of co-teaching we did. But it was kind of day by day. We would sort of think of how we would make a plan for how we were going to teach this subject. But
When you started, was there a beginning, middle, and end that you...
we made lesson plans. There was a couple times I tried to wing it and like, oh, I can cover this. I'll just read the book and teach it. But it never went well, so I quit. I only did that a couple times. I find that if
So
I
when
make
you
a
say
plan,
lesson plans, that means you sat down before the class and you wrote out the lesson plan.
yeah, they gave us a syllabus, and the syllabus would say we have to cover these problems. I would usually, or what's it called, the syllabus?
The government learning objectives.
Yeah,
the
there's-
LOs.
There's learning objectives that I knew I had to. These kids had to know these things, and then I would also look at what the LGCSE exam, like a standardized exam that they had to take.
I was
look
going to
at-
ask about standardized exams, yeah.
Yeah, so I would look at the learning objectives and look at what the standardized exam problems might look like, and then I would write out a plan for how to teach them how to do those problems. I guess I was teaching to the test for to some extent, but I was also trying to make it relatable rather than just numbers and letters.
And Hannah, did you see obvious progress in their English?
I did with some of the students. So the first year, some of the students, I could tell they had improved in their knowledge of grammar in English and writing in English, particularly by using some specific strategies that my co-teacher and I had learned about online that weren't necessarily in the textbook. I think we used one that was using a hamburger method for writing an essay, basically.
Hamburger method?
So the bun is the introduction, and then the inside the body, and then the end is the bottom is the conclusion. And so we kind of used a example on the board of that. So we drew that on the board, and I don't know. So then they got really interested in it because they really liked that visual interpretation.
Oh, that's good.
So that was the first year. The second year, I saw a lot of progress with their phonics. There were some, I think I had a student who'd been held back who was in my first class, and then he was in my second class again. And I noticed with phonics that he didn't really speak that much English, but he came up to the board and he knew how to do several of the pronunciations of these letters, and was doing them at the board. And I remember just being really impressed that he had picked up on it when he didn't seem to be picking up on other things necessarily, but he was picking up on phonics specifically. So that was neat to see, I think.
I remember. just got to thinking. I remember the girls being pretty confident that they were going to do well on their exams. You asked about like, did they take to heart any of the anti-girls aren't good at math rhetoric? And I think they must have, because they were pretty confident that they were going to do well on their standardized exams. They're like, I'm feeling really good about this. I think this whole class is going to do great. And
So you must have felt pretty good about that.
yeah, because a lot of girls had that same sentiment. Like they're like, oh, we can do all this now. So I was thinking about what your question, and I was like, well, I guess they must have, because later in the year, the girls would seem pretty confident that they do well in their exam. They ended up doing okay, above average, but I don't know how they would have done otherwise.
Yeah,
It's kinda,
that's right.
but above average that's among the schools that have boys and girls, so it's kind of hard to have a control.
So they did above average in comparison to all of Lesotho high schools, including mixed schools.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
So, and
All right.
I think they did pretty well.
So
I think they did a little bit better than they did historically, too. So
Well,
hopefully.
that's great.
So they didn't do the best in the country, but I think they did better than they normally did. So hopefully,
Did you
I left a
feel a sense of satisfaction day to day?
It kind of depends. If I felt like the lesson went really well and the girls really knew it or really had it figured out, I would feel good about it. But then there were days where maybe I didn't plan the lesson well, and
Yeah, but I meant generally, not day to day, but because that's true for everybody and whatever they do.
Yeah, generally I felt happy. I would have liked it to be even better still, of course, but I felt like I did my job.
Mm-hmm. And you enjoyed doing it?
Yeah, I enjoyed. I enjoyed the fact that they learned math pretty well, compared to what they used to.
Okay.
Or historically.
And you think that was important that they learn math?
Yeah.
Your eyes.
Yeah, my eyes are starting to bother me. But yeah, it's.
Because I talked to some RPCVs who, when I asked that question, said, "Oh God, I dreaded it."
Dreaded teaching them math.
Or
Whatever it was.
they were doing.
Whatever it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Their assignment.
I think we knew people like that.
Yeah, I never dreaded it. I just wanted to do well for those girls.
Mm-hmm.
It was important to me that they learn math well, and so they could go in the world. And I mean, if nothing else, they could be able to exchange currency with when they sold cabbages. Or they just had a decent foundation for learning math. Whether they went on to actually be a nurse or whatever they did in their life, you got to know math. At least.
Now you, Hannah, did you feel happy and satisfied most often, or generally speaking?
I think generally I found that I really enjoyed teaching. I felt different from when I was working in public relations, because I felt like I was daily making an impact and could see, like there were some students who were particularly very fast learners in my classes. There would be like 5 to 10 who would be just on top of learning, and so you could really see it, and so that felt really satisfying, I think, to see that. And then there would be times when no one was listening to me because my classroom was so big, and there's kind of an issue of like classroom management there as someone who's not local, kind of, because like we weren't using the same classroom management system because they have corporal punishment there. So we weren't using that, so it was kind of
You were
hard.
not going to paddle anybody.
Correct. So it was sometimes they were less likely to listen to you because they knew you weren't going to do that, I think. But obviously that's not, corporal punishment isn't a good way of disciplining because then they're just fearful of the teacher. And so that's kind of a whole thing that the government is working on. They're trying to get teachers to learn new ways of classroom management. So my teachers and I would try to be doing better, like positive classroom management, positive reinforcement.
Yeah.
But with such a large classroom, it would get difficult. So overall, it was very satisfying to see students learning, but there were definitely times where it would be like, oh, it's so exhausting, I'm so tired because they aren't listening to me and that sort of thing.
Did you ever get to the point, you said you had a class of 50.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever get to the point where you thought, I need to go see somebody and get this thing cut in half? I can do really well with 25, but 50?
I don't think I ever thought about like that I could actually get that done. I think I just knew they were missing a teacher. So like normally they had 3 fifth grade teachers, and that year they only had 2, and so that was kind of the way it worked out. I guess because there were 2 teachers in our classroom, and they thought, oh, we'll put 50 students in here, but that just made it.
Do you think they just dumped on you because you were the American?
I feel like it was because there were 2 of us, the 2 co-teachers. They were like, well, we'll put them all in there. But that meant there was so little space in the classroom, and just it was difficult to like manage them all.
But you handled it. You handled it.
There were desks from the back wall all the way up to the door. The teacher had their desk.
Yeah. It made it hard to like move around because there were so many desks, and you couldn't really sometimes to get to a student to help them, you'd be having to kind of climb over a desk or something. So that made it hard.
Oh boy. I was a teacher too, and I never had anything like 50. I mean, the most I ever had was maybe 30.
Yeah,
and I thought that was getting to be unmanageable. 50?
Yeah.
Oh.
The thing is, I would really enjoy it whenever I had this like a smaller class. Like sometimes we would split up the class every now and then. Like maybe my co-teacher was going to be teaching a topic to this part of the class, and then I was going to teach the specific English topic to this part of the class, and that made it very impactful, I felt like. But that's the nature of teaching. If you can teach to a smaller group, it's usually going to be more of an impact on that group. But there was a lack of teachers, so.
So tell me about your home setting there.
We
what was
had
it like?
A house that the other volunteers considered to be a mansion. Because it was bigger than most people's houses. So we had like a kitchen that was like a small little kitchen that had like a little so we had electricity that
oh, you had electricity.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we didn't have electricity at our training village, but when we got to our permanent site there was electricity. So the girls' school, where he was teaching, we lived on that campus, and that campus had electricity.
Okay.
So we would have to go walk a couple of miles to pay for electricity.
Yeah, it was like a subscription.
Pay as you go.
Yeah, pay as you go.
Yeah.
Awesome. So
you mean if you didn't live where you did, you would have had to walk 2 miles?
Well, we did have to walk. We walked 2 miles to buy electricity, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. So, like, we would go there, and you pay this, you're at this little shop window, and you pay them, and they put in your number for you have like a meter in your house, and they put in the number for your meter, and then they put an amount of electricity to it. And
like how much could you buy?
You can buy, I guess, as much as you want.
Could you buy a month? 2 months?
It was
I think it was by the kilowatt hour or something, I guess. It must have been by the kilowatt hour.
So we would just use it until it ran out, basically.
So how long would that be?
Probably about a month.
Okay.
I think we usually tried to buy an amount that we thought would last for a month.
Yeah. Okay.
So we didn't use very much electricity. Like, we didn't leave a heater, because we had a heater that was like a space heater, but we didn't like to leave it plugged in for very long because that would zap all the electricity. So we mostly just used it for turning on like our one light bulb in each room that we had, and we charged our phones and laptops. We had a microwave, and we used that.
You had a microwave?
Yeah, we specifically bought a microwave, so we didn't have to use a stove. But we did have a propane stove, so it had like a little propane tank and that's how we cooked on the stove.
Yeah, we bought the microwave pretty early because I was like, oh, if we had a microwave, this would be a very manageable situation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Why not?
Yeah.
Sure.
So that's why I said people called our house the mansion, like the
Mhm.
Morija Mansion, I think is what it was called. But it
It
really.
was nice. It was extraordinarily nice compared to what the other volunteers had. But that was in part because we were a married couple, so we needed
More space.
a little more space than an individual might.
And the
Yeah.
bigger houses, I think, were more likely to be like that, I guess. Like, because the main type of housing in Lesotho is called a rondavel, and so it's like a round, like a circular, or what would that be?
That's like a cylinder with
yeah.
a
And then it has like a little grass.
cone roof.
Cone-shaped
Yeah. Grass roof.
Oh, I see.
So most
Yeah.
volunteers were living in a house like that because it would be like a single room, and then the volunteer would just be in that room. And so most of their
Right.
houses were just going to be like that. Whereas because there were two of us, we had this bigger house, I guess. And it just so happened to be in a village that was near to the capital, so it had electricity that had gone to it. Whereas if you were in a rural village, you weren't going to have electricity necessarily because Lesotho, when we were there, was still getting electricity to its villages. So
Were there other PCVs living around you?
not very close to us.
Somewhat. There was maybe one other volunteer, John, like
Who was like
down the road.
an
maybe.
hour away, like by taxi. from
Yeah,
us.
it'd take an hour or more to get to the next, for a volunteer to get to
Yeah.
us.
Yeah, even though he was relatively close, it was just that we were taking the public transit, so he had to. But he would come sometimes on like Sundays. We would do like dinner with him. Or
Yeah,
something.
for a little bit.
Now, I was going to ask,
Yeah.
did you have much contact with other PCVs during your 2 years, not just...
Not as much between conferences or trainings and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We would kind of be on our own.
There were less volunteers in our district because it was the capital district, and so there were less villages, I think, that had volunteers. And they don't like to place volunteers near the capital as much because they consider the capital to be less safe than the rest of the country. And so they didn't want to have as many volunteers there, I think.
Is that because you could get mugged in the Capitol?
Yeah, I think so. So, because they actually had a volunteer who was murdered there in 2014.
Oh, wow.
In a mugging situation. And so they completely changed the way that they
Huh.
allowed volunteers to go to the Capitol after that. So they used to like hold trainings in the Capitol, but after that happened, they no longer held trainings there. All that was there is the Peace Corps office, and our trainings were all in other villages instead.
Mhm.
So
Okay. Did you travel together with other PCVs or not?
we did to South Africa once, right? Because we
Did you do that or?
no, you went with me.
Oh yeah. We went to a place in South Africa just north of Lesotho called
Clarence.
Clarence.
It's like right over the border in South Africa. It's kind of a little resort-y type, like not like a resort that you would think of.
Not a ritzy resort.
Yeah, just kind of like a town that had like little lodges that people stayed in, and like there were places to go.
Very scenic.
Yeah, it was really pretty. It had
Yeah.
a lot of little plateaus again, and a lot of trees there, I think. And so it kind of reminded me of going to like a ski resort town or something, like a really small one or something. But I think they had like a brewery there and like a spa and some stuff like that. And so it was kind of a place volunteers like to go to.
Relative to Lesotho, it was really developed, so it was kind of a reprieve from
Yeah.
the less developed area.
Uh-huh.
So it
Because
was,
you went to you stayed at a guest house, which was basically a bed and breakfast, but they called them guest houses, that like had electricity, fully running water, and like,
hot running water
yeah.
showers and
and then there were like a lot of
okay.
restaurants in that town and stuff. But it was
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
hard to get to because you had to travel by minibus taxi all the way up there. So even though if you were driving, it wouldn't be that difficult.
How long would it take?
We stayed over. So we went to the Capitol, and so for us to get to the Capitol, it was about an hour or so, right? Like an hour by taxi.
Yeah.
And then we had to wait in the Capitol for a few hours for our taxi there to take us to the north of the country where we were going to stay the night with a friend before traveling to South Africa. And so that was like a stressful experience because it was winter and we weren't supposed to be out after dark. And so we got to the town we were going to stay in.
What do you mean you say we aren't supposed to be out? Who says?
The-
Peace Corps?
Yeah, Peace Corps says you're not supposed to be out after dark. Partly having to do with that murder that happened that was after dark, I think. So
Yeah, that's also just kind of wise. The best way to get out of trouble is not to get into it.
mm-hmm.
So it's just generally it's much smarter for not to be out and about.
Like,
And how
let's
much
see.
of the year should you not be out after dark? How much of the year? Half?
I guess the whole year, right? But
Oh, the
Yeah.
whole year? Really?
but
Yeah.
sometimes, but basically just in the summer, it's going to be light later. Is basically just what I meant. They have the same time the entire year. They don't have daylight savings time, so it got dark at
Sooner.
Yeah, it got
Yeah.
dark at 7:30 ish in the summer, and then during the winter it'd be dark at like 5 ish.
I suppose.
Yeah, that's
And
probably
so
right.
you kind of had to think really carefully about traveling. So that was really the most stressful thing the entire time was traveling because of that. Like they like put a lot of fear in us about being out after dark, I guess.
Do you think that was an overreaction?
It probably depends on where you are.
In Maseru, it's not in the capital. I would say it's not an overreaction.
But
But
Yeah.
we did have a friend that same John guy that we mentioned earlier who lived near us. He got, I guess, mugged.
yeah,
Somebody
and it was after
appro-
dark,
af-
right?
Yeah, after dark, tried to approach them and take their cell phones. I think money and cell phones.
And did they?
I think they
I think
did.
they took the money. I don't guess they took their phones.
Yeah, but he got like his money stolen. I know. So, and that was in the capital district. He wasn't in the capital, but he was in our district, which was where the capital was located. But he was out after dark. So
Yeah, I think they figured out who that guy was, and
got the money back.
I don't know if they got the money back, but I guess that guy got caught. The guy that mugged him.
Yeah.
But,
Whereas during the day in the capital, I accidentally left my wallet in a taxi, and the person actually got it back to me. So,
neat.
it's like people are very helpful. It's just sometimes like after dark, I think that's when some people are not up to
When the
good
creeps
things.
come out?
I guess so. Like
there was another instance where we were traveling, and it just so happened to take longer to get.
which was the story I was telling. I think that
Was it?
yeah.
Yeah. Well, but anyway, a guy kind of saw us, a couple white folks in Southern Africa, and he was like, "Oh, let me take you where you need to go.
In Lesotho.
Let me help you out."
specifically.
Yeah, we were
Mhm.
in Lesotho.
That was what I was telling you earlier. Is we were going to stay the night at someone's house, and it had gotten too late in the day. It was probably like 8 o'clock, I think, because the taxi took a lot longer to leave than we thought it was going to. And so once we got to the town we were staying in, it was dark, and the taxi just like was going to the I guess like the taxi rank is what it's called, which is just where all the taxis park. And we were like, no, we need to get off because we need to go that way. And so he like stops in the middle of the road and kind of flags someone down. And that guy you're talking about, right, ran
Yeah.
over and was like, let me put you on here. So like they were being really helpful. Like the taxi
Yeah.
drivers were like making sure we weren't going to be out walking by ourselves in the dark.
Oh, that's good.
But
That's good.
yeah, there was a sense of like, oh man, we got a situation here. We need to keep these white folks from getting robbed
Uh-huh.
because they're out of
Place.
fish out of water.
Yeah. Well,
Because
that's
you
neat.
stand out.
So all that to
At
say
night
is
especially.
maybe it seems like an overreaction, but just that small percentage of people that would mug somebody,
They're out
maybe
at
it
night,
wasn't
I
an
would say.
overreaction.
I don't know, but it seems like something that Peace Corps volunteers could get together to discuss. If we want to stay out, is there strength in numbers?
That was
We
either
can
is
meet.
in numbers for sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like that. Or, no, Peace Corps said don't do it, so we're not going to do it.
Yeah. I think, really, I think it's just common sense at the end of the day.
Based on experience.
Common sense isn't always common.
Yeah.
But the people we heard of that got caught up were just at a bar drinking
That's
a
what
lot.
I was gonna say is one of the biggest issues with our group, with the people we knew who were volunteers in Lesotho, was just drinking too much and getting into trouble for that reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I feel like drinking a lot and walking down dark alleys.
Yeah, because there was
Your setup.
Yeah.
Yep.
there was they had like a wine festival once a year in the capital in Lesotho, and like there was kind of like an unspoken like allowance of people to go to that, and so I went to it with a big group. And two of the people that were in the group like went off separately afterward, and they had been drinking at this wine festival, and they ended up like being out all night in the capital, and I think there was something about them getting mugged, and they were drinking, and so we weren't allowed to ever go to that wine festival again. But I would say that it was not necessarily an overreaction
No,
because that those people got into trouble and kind of ruined it for everyone else. So,
Yeah.
but I would say that drinking is kind of an issue of young people the world over for sure. But that was kind of what happened there.
Let me ask about your language at the toward the end of your stay. Would you say that you knew the local language well enough to have meaningful conversations in that language? Not in depth, but just, meaningful, satisfying conversations.
Probably not for me, because all our teaching was in English, and we just weren't immersed in it enough to have conversations. But I could travel well. I could maybe introduce myself or say who I was or what I was doing there to like a cab driver or something. As far as a back and forth conversation, like how the wife and kids kind of conversation, not really. I'm just like, I'm a Peace Corps volunteer and I'm teaching math.
Yeah, we knew how to say
And
the
I'm
essential
going to this place.
information.
Yeah.
They told us that because we were a couple, we were less likely to know the language as well because we were together speaking English all the time.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Sure.
But
So you agree pretty much with what John said?
yeah,
For
I
you?
think I knew it a little bit better, but that's just because I had already learned a second language, and so I think I was able to pick up on some of the grammar concepts more easily than he was. But at the same time, yeah, because I wasn't needing to speak it except when I was traveling for the most part. So
Yeah, and those were getting directions and stuff like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I basically knew how to
Whatever.
say those essential learned conversations about traveling or the weather or like how I'm doing or what my job is.
Yeah,
basically.
yeah.
Sometimes we start speaking Sesotho to somebody, and they're like, "Whoa, how do you know this language?"
Yeah.
That
You don't
must,
look like somebody that knows Sesotho.
that must have made you feel good when they say that, didn't
Yeah, well, it's kind of a courtesy, in my opinion, to sort of at least be able to say a few things.
it? Yeah,
Get around in the country that you're residing in.
right,
So
right.
it was good to see them happy that you took the time to learn their language. It kind of made it feel
Yeah.
worthwhile.
Before you left, did you have any role in training new PCVs?
A little bit.
Briefly, yeah.
We had them.
Just-
We had new ones staying at our house twice, right? Because we had the two girls who came the first year with us, Lily and Kendall.
Yeah, so during the training, they will have like a what do they call it? Live with the volunteers sort of part
Like
Yeah,
a week.
towards
yeah.
the end of the training part. They'll
Yeah.
have you go live with some volunteer or stay
Sure.
with some volunteers so they can kind of show you what they do,
Mm-hmm.
and then they'll all come back together and I think they'll share their experiences or something.
Yeah. So we had
Sort of.
two staying, or three. We had three staying with us because you had two math volunteers and I had one English volunteer.
Yeah.
So we had three other PCVs who were new. They were trainees staying with us for a week, and so they came to school with us and watched us teach, and then we helped them kind of put together a lesson to teach as well in our schools. So, and then we taught them about what we were doing in the village and stuff like that. And then right before we left, we had the new volunteers who were going to replace us come and stay with us for a week as well. And so it was kind of similar. We kind of did the same thing with them, where we were showing them the ropes, and then they kind of watched us teach, and then they taught and stuff like that. And
Bringing
then
them up to speed.
yeah, and then they were also just meeting all of the other teachers and people in the community.
Did you like this? Did you enjoy that part of it?
Yeah, I thought that was I enjoyed that.
Yeah, it's good to show someone what you've been working on.
You're really helping them out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was I think whenever we did that as the new trainees, whenever we went and stayed with someone, it was very helpful, because I remember that before that I hadn't had any teaching experience actually in a Basotho classroom.
Mm-hmm.
So because they kind of have it set up to where you go to this other volunteer's house prior to doing any actual classroom teaching, I think. And so I was actually in her classroom, and she was a real teacher from the U.S., and so she was very good at teaching, and so I got a lot out of learning from her.
Yeah,
Rachel.
the people they were a tough act to follow, because that's what they did professionally. They taught.
Oh, you're talking about the people we replaced.
Oh,
But
I
yeah.
thought that's what you were talking about.
Well, yes,
Yeah.
they were too. The first people we stayed with, Rachel and Jeremy, she was a teacher
yeah,
too.
Yeah.
But yeah, the people we replaced in Mauritius were also real teachers, and so coming to stay with them at the end of training as well, when we were trainees, that was helpful too, because we got to watch them teach. And so
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I forgot to ask about during an educational year, there is some months off, right? Like summer, you get off here. Do they have that there?
they have
A summer
January-
vacation or anything like that?
Yeah, they have January to December is their school year, but they have regular vacation the way we do, kind of. It's just that their school year starts in January and ends in December, right?
So it's year round.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they have a summer vacation and a winter vacation.
How
So-
long are those? Couple
So-
weeks?
2 months
Oh, 2 months? So
For the
4
summer?
months off?
for the summer, or did they end in November? It must have been November that they have until, and then they have the month of December off, and part of January.
I can't remember. It's a nice little break, though. I remember that.
I think
Okay.
I think
It's,
maybe it's slightly shorter than our summer break because they get a winter break too. So maybe it's the winter break and the summer break are the same length.
Yeah.
All right. Well, the reason I bring this up is to ask, what do you do during that time?
Isn't that when they had the conferences and
Yeah.
stuff like
They
that?
had a lot
We
of
would have
trainings in the breaks, basically.
Oh, Peace Corps did?
Yeah, Peace Corps volunteers would get together, and we'd have the mid-service conference or something like that.
We had a grassroots soccer. So one of the things we were teaching was grassroots soccer, which you didn't have to teach, but you could choose to teach it. And so that's basically a sex education training that uses sports as the method, basically. So mainly to prevent HIV and AIDS, because in Southern Africa, HIV and AIDS is really high. And so basically teaching them how to prevent spreading HIV and AIDS, but then also teaching them about sex education as well. But you're playing games with them while teaching it. So so we went to a training for that during the winter. It was a winter break, I think, in 2018 during July or something. And then we also had another training, but I don't remember what that training was that year. We had a lot of trainings in the first winter, I remember. And then we also went on a vacation, because that was when you were able to take your vacation days, usually was during the breaks, kind of similar to
Sure.
the teacher here. We went to Cape Town, South Africa. His mom and aunt visited us in July 2018 for that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the following summer we went to what's that Cape, or we went to this really big animal Kruger National Park in South Africa. It's like a really big
It's on the east
Animal
side of
park?
Africa.
Yeah.
East side of South Africa.
Yeah, so that was really cool. My parents visited for that, and we went there.
Oh, that's neat. So
Yeah.
each of your families came and saw you while you were there.
Yeah, his mom and aunt
Neat.
and my parents. Yeah, and then my aunt visited us right before we left in July 2019. She visited and just spent time with us in Lesotho. So that was cool too. So it was really exciting to get to show our families like where we were and like
absolutely.
show
Did
them our
you
schools. and
actually, did you have a chance to show them where you lived?
Yeah, they
Oh.
all came to our house.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so that was
Wow.
really cool.
They were all interested to see it.
Of course.
Yeah, my parents were really interested in my school and my aunt. I don't think I don't think his mom and aunt were there when the school year was going on, but my parents were there like the day before, like the day that school started. I think they left that morning, and so they went with me to school, and so they like saw my school getting started and everything. So that was neat.
At the end, did you have any regrets, I guess, about something that you thought about doing but hadn't gotten around to it?
Regret.
Regrets is too strong a word. I don't like
Like
to
you
use
wish-
that
Something that
word.
we wish.
That you wish you could have done.
Yeah.
But we didn't.
Yeah. I don't guess so. I
Okay.
think I'm pretty satisfied with what I got out of it, and
Yep.
I think if anything that comes close is that I wish I was a better teacher, but
Oh well.
I've not a lot I can do
No.
about that,
No.
other than get more experience teaching. But.
Mhm.
Yeah. I guess for me, I don't really think there was. I think I wish I had had more time to teach life skills, which was the other class I taught, but I didn't have as much time to teach it because it kept seeming like the English teaching would take up a lot of time, and then I would be able to go teach life skills like once a week or something, and then we had the grassroots soccer like every now and then too, which was like an after school program that was at the school.
Mhm.
But like it was kind of hard to like fit those things in sometimes, and
Yeah.
so I think that was
Yeah.
which the life skills class was something the government required schools to do, but then the grassroots soccer was like an extension of that after school, I guess. But I felt like those were kind of things that were very easy to see kids like learning that, because and it was also the 7th graders that I was teaching, so they knew
Mhm.
English really well already, and so you could talk to them really in depth about like these life topics.
Oh,
And
that's
so
good.
that
Well-
felt like it was very impactful, but I would say I wish I'd gotten to do that a little bit more, but it was just hard to fit it in sometimes.
Yeah. Well, now at the end, what were you talking about doing after you left Lesotho?
Well, I work for Department of Transportation, Texas Department of Transportation, and
Now, right.
now, yeah, and that's
You didn't then.
What were we thinking about doing right before we
Yeah.
left?
What are you
in
going to do?
Lesotho
Yeah.
or when we got back.
No,
Okay,
in Lesotho.
sorry, misunderstood the question. In Lesotho, what were we going to do?
So he started applying
No,
to
I
a
mean
bunch of
after
jobs.
you leave
Yeah.
Lesotho and you're coming back to the U.S.
Mhm.
to do what?
He
What's-
started
what's your
applying to a lot
plan?
of jobs, right?
You mean like foods and stuff we missed, or
No,
like-
No, no, no.
I think
What's your next? Where are you going to live
I
after
think you
you?
missed the
Oh.
question. He asked what our plan was, like, at the end of Lesotho for coming back. Like, so you started applying to jobs, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I was applying to jobs, I was wanting to get back to the U.S. and kind of hit the ground running, being employed. And,
Sure.
You started,
Uh,
like, looking on LinkedIn for, like, RPCVs, didn't you?
Yeah.
To try to, like, I don't even remember how. He somehow, like, got connected to an RPCV. I think we might have started joining some, like, RPCV Texas groups, because we kind of decided we wanted to go live in Texas. And so, he was looking at, like, these RPCV groups for, like, Dallas, Houston, and Austin.
Yeah.
And I think we posted in there that you were looking for a job, right?
Yeah. I was.
And
Sure.
someone commented on one of them and told you to apply to Texas Department of Transportation. And so you did, but it was a very long process. But did you apply while we were still there? I don't remember if you did or not.
Yeah, I think I've applied to several places. I was
Mm-hmm.
mostly just job hunting.
Like while we were
But
still
I
there.
figured out that Texas Department of Transportation looked like a good employer.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause you could still get a pension at the time. I was lucky enough to get a pension. And they have real low employee turnover, which is a good sign.
Mm-hmm.
And
Sure
good
is.
benefits and good work-life balance. So I wanted to work for TxDOT. And then I was just putting out applications into other places and trying to reach out to find connections, and network to
Yeah.
try to get a job in the U.S. so that go back to being an adult in the U.S.
When you left Lesotho, did you have a job waiting for you?
No, we got back just in time for COVID. So,
Yeah, that's also what happened.
yeah, but,
Oh, that's right, 2019, sure.
yeah.
Yeah, we were like, I don't know, we came back. My sister was getting married. My sister got married pretty immediately after we came back. She waited to have her wedding for us to get back.
Yeah.
And so that happened. We also took a closed service COS trip to South America. So that was something we were planning as well while we were leaving. Because you get like your stipend at the end.
Right.
And so we used some of that to go on a trip to South America. So that was really cool. And yeah, then we went to my sister's wedding, and then pretty much COVID happened immediately. And
Yeah.
so we had been back like a month and heard about COVID happening in China, and then it started coming to the U.S. and we were living with my parents while that was going on. And then you finally got a job in April, at the end of April.
Yeah,
April of 20?
Yeah, 2020. Yeah.
yeah. But I guess that was the immediate plan, was to stay in Duncan, Oklahoma with her parents. My parents also live in Duncan, so
Yeah.
Just
Where it all began.
Yeah.
going back
We
to
went back.
home base.
Yeah, so that was interesting living with my parents again as a
I'll
married couple.
After 2 years in the Peace Corps.
Yeah, we were definitely ready to like get out with COVID going on, like a group of 4 people, and then two of my sisters came and stayed with us for a month too because of COVID. And so it was like
Wow.
so many of us in the house. So everyone was ready to be out, I think. But yeah.
Well, I was going to ask if it wasn't kind of weird getting out of Peace Corps. I mean, you spent 2 years in this culture, in this environment that used to be so strange to you, but it's not anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're coming back into this, which you haven't seen in a long time. And
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was. They talk about reverse culture shock, right?
yeah,
Our close the service conference. I think I didn't really have as much shock as I just figured out that I developed weird habits. So, for example, you have to do all your own dishes using, or of course you do your own dishes, but you're using a basin full of water, and
yeah,
it's a pain to do dishes in Lesotho. So I got to where I just used, whenever I cooked, I used as few dishes as possible.
We were,
So I'd use like a spoon to stir would be the spoon I ate with or something.
well, we would
So,
also share some of our dishes too, which is probably weird
Yeah,
sounding, but like
yeah.
like he would use a plate and then I would use the plate, and like so then I think we were back home and we were doing the same thing, and we are like, why are we doing this?
Why are we
There's a
doing
dishwasher.
Or her mom would be cooking, she'd be stirring with one spoon, throw it in the sink, and then put the food from one bowl that she cooked in into another bowl to serve in. It's just like using so many dishes.
I think for me, one of the biggest culture shocks was, or reverse culture shock was like how big stores are in the U.S.
yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I think we went to Walmart, like, right after we got back, and I was just, like, very overwhelmed feeling, which I think is something a lot of other volunteers had mentioned, that they
I
felt that way.
mentioned
Yeah. So, like, going, and there's just so many things to choose from, and it just felt like I was very indecisive and had no idea how to choose products.
Yeah.
I remember going into a Safeway 2 days after I got back, and looking around, looking kind of like this at all the options and everything, and I got this overwhelming feeling and wound up throwing up.
Oh no.
Oh, really?
Throwing up right there in the Safeway.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I can understand why. It's overwhelming.
I guess another thing I noticed, it's whenever you're living with the inflation, you're going to the store every day and something raises a few pennies. The cost of something is a couple cents more every other week. You don't notice it as much, but when you're gone for 2 years and you come back and it's like 50 cents more than you remember it being.
I
Yeah.
remember you
Especially
going.
after living somewhere that was so relatively cheap. Like you can buy a Coke for 50 cents and then you come here,
I remember you going.
$3.
Yeah, I remember. So my parents picked us up from the airport, and in Dallas when we got back, and he goes into this gas station while my dad's getting gas, and comes out with like a Dr. Pepper, and he's like, "This thing was so expensive." And like,
Yeah,
so
a bag of chips, some Reese's, some soda, just all the foods I've been thinking about for 2 years.
Yeah,
All
and then
the
they're
junk
expensive.
food.
And then I would say the other thing that was kind of shocking to get back was like going, because we got back and immediately went to Thanksgiving. Like we kind of planned it so we were going to get back right at Thanksgiving and could go to his family's Thanksgiving and mine. And it was kind of strange for me, like surreal, to be sitting in this group of people who were just talking about like mundane life.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm like, this is like not like, we're not going to talk about like what's happening in Lesotho now. Like, I don't know, like just like no one was cognizant of what's happening like in the world basically. And they're just talking about like, oh yeah, I saw so-and-so at the Walmart yesterday or something. And it's just, it was a weird experience, I guess.
Did they seem interested in your story? Did they want to talk to you about,
Some
hey,
people did.
2 years?
Yeah, I'm probably not as interested as we would like them to be.
Yeah, like I
'Cause
think you
it's-
kind of expect people to be really interested, but
Yeah.
they're not
But
always.
I mean, after you live there for 2 years, it's all you're thinking about for 2 years after you get back. So it's so why is nobody asking me
My
about
sisters.
I know, and even the ones that understand that you were there and you even bring it up, just alluding to it
Yes.
and hoping that somebody will say, "Oh yeah, well tell me about that," or ask you a pointed question about something you did or observed there, and they finally do ask that question. And you start to respond, and they say, "Oh, that reminds me of what happened to me last Tuesday. I was, you know, and it's gone."
Yeah. One of the things my sisters were always making fun of me for was I would always say, "Well, I was in Africa," and they'd be like, "Oh, Hannah's going on about." But I guess I would just mention it all the time. But that's because it was like such a major
It's
part of
on
my
your
life.
mind.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's like I
That's
just
right.
spent 2 years in Lesotho. It's a really big deal. And so they would always say, "Oh, Hannah."
Yeah, and there were some things that happened while we were gone. I think, did Oklahoma start having dispensaries and
Oh
stuff?
yeah,
while
there
we
were
gone?
dispensaries all of a sudden
marijuana.
when we got
Yeah,
back.
when we got back, we're like, are they selling marijuana?
Yeah, so that was kind of interesting.
We're kind of out of the loop on that, so that caught us by surprise.
They also started having the credit card chip where you could like
Oh,
put
yeah.
it up, like touch the thing or whatever
Uh-huh,
with it,
uh-huh.
and we hadn't had that before. So.
And then being able to track people's location on
Oh
your phone.
yeah, people were like tracking our
Oh,
location
yeah,
all of a
yeah.
sudden. With my dad's like, "Here, make sure I'm on your Find My Friends," and I was like, "What?"
I remember there was a QR code. I guess QR codes really took off while we were gone, but there's a QR code that said scan this, go to this webpage and
For
check
the
in.
menus and things
Well,
at restaurants.
What I'm thinking of is I went to get a flat repaired or something, a flat tire repaired, and I was like, I don't have this app. How am I thought it was an application you had to have, but you can use your camera.
Oh yeah.
But I was like, how am I supposed? I don't have this. I don't want to download an app just to get a flat fixed.
Yeah.
But somebody finally came out and it just like, just go to your camera, hold it up, show me how to do it. I was like, oh, I would. It's a long story, but I didn't know that.
Well, the last thing I want to ask you is, a lot of people that I've interviewed and have read about have described their experience in Peace Corps as being transformative to them. Would you use that word? And if you would, elaborate.
I think it made me more comfortable with public speaking, just being a teacher for so long.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more comfortable talking in front of a crowd. So that's the first thing that jumps out. And I feel like that's a good skill to have. I think just being able to kind of helps your confidence, like knowing that you're able to do what we did in the Peace Corps, boiling all our drinking water without getting sick. We know we could go on vacation to Mexico and we probably wouldn't get food poisoning, whereas a lot of people that haven't developed that skill, they might end up getting Montezuma's revenge.
Mm-hmm.
I think I mentioned before that I wasn't totally happy being in the oil industry.
Yeah.
So I went from the Peace Corps and I got into the transportation industry. And while I was there, I became an engineer in training so that I could get a professional engineering license, so I could be a official, according to the state of Texas, engineer. It's like a car carrying engineer.
Uh-huh.
And then I got a master's degree after coming out of the Peace Corps. And I think if I hadn't have joined the Peace Corps, I'd probably still be at that same oil field job.
Really?
That I didn't necessarily enjoy as much.
Uh-huh.
And I really enjoy what I'm doing now, and I feel like I might not have gotten my PE license, professional engineering license. I might not have got a master's degree. So I think it was a stepping stone for me.
A necessary
Yeah.
stepping stone, right?
Yeah,
To get to where you...
Yeah, to get to where I am.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess you could say it was necessary.
Okay,
I don't
Hannah?
know if I would have
Yeah,
here.
I would say that it was transformative. I think it completely changed my worldview, I think. Kind of my reasoning for going into the Peace Corps was I wanted to make a difference, but it was also like, I think it was a bit of like white saviorism. Like I felt like I was supposed to go help these people because they were poor and they weren't in as good of a situation as I was. And then going there, you kind of realize like, oh, like these people are perfectly happy in their life. Like they don't need you to come there and like tell them how to live or whatever. So like, I think it was like a transformative experience in that I realized like America doesn't have all the right answers. Like these people are very happy and very like they have this wonderful country that they're living in. It's helpful for them to receive help for making their lives better, but people in the US need that too. So it's like it was kind of I don't know, it helped me see that like, oh, like you're not better than anyone else type situation. And then sorry, what?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so and then I think now looking back on it, it's really like helped me be able to make sense of world events that are happening now more, I think.
Sure.
So like when like Black Lives Matter happened, like I was more ready to understand like learning about my white privilege because I had already like lived in Lesotho and like it was kind of something I'd already experienced because there, like for example, you have white privilege as a white person in an predominantly black country. Like you can go get on like a taxi, for example, and they'll put you in the front seat because like you have white privilege as a white person in a black country. So it's like I could already like kind of make those connections, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then also while we were there, we learned a lot about South African apartheid. And so now that I'm learning about the apartheid that's in Palestine, it's like I already understand that a little bit more, and so it was a little easier to start like learning things basically, and
Better jumping off point for
learning. I think.
Understanding.
Yeah. So I think just my world. I think if I hadn't had that experience, it would have been a lot tougher to like start unlearning things that I'd been taught and learning.
Yeah,
stuff, I
or
guess.
maybe even impossible.
Yeah. So I think sometimes I'll talk to someone about like, because I'm really pro-Palestine, and so I'll be like talking to someone about like, do you understand like the settler colonialism that's been going on for 75 years in Palestine that Israel is doing, and they just like have no idea and don't understand what, like, it's like we're on different wavelengths.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I think part of it is just like having lived in Southern Africa where people were colonized, like I saw like directly how that took place. I saw like the actual effects of apartheid in South Africa, like being there. And so I think like we went to Robben Island where Nelson Mandela was held
Oh
prisoner.
yeah.
So it's just like I feel like people who haven't had an experience like that, it's sometimes harder for them, or who haven't had an experience like that in the U.S., maybe as a marginalized person themselves, that it's harder for them to learn that, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's all great. Yes.
You know, I was just gonna say I learned more about how charitable things should work. So, like, what would make charitable work more impactful is going to the people and assessing what their needs are, or what they perceive their needs to be, rather than imposing on them what you think they need.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I really saw firsthand how important that is. Because if you build them something that they don't really understand or don't think that they could use, then it's a waste.
There's a
Really have to talk to people to understand what their needs are and to be able to help them.
There's a kind of a parody movie that has Tom Hanks in it about the Peace Corps. Do you remember?
Oh,
So
I
what?
saw that. That's a very, very old movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Tom Hanks is young,
I
pretty
think
young
that
in
movie kind of, like, even though that movie's kind of silly, but I think it kind of shows that idea, because they go there and they say, we think you need a bridge, and like the people don't even need the bridge, and then it causes all these other problems.
Right.
And so I think that's kind of a good like representation of what you're saying.
Yeah, because I think we would see like a school building or something like at Tabang High School nearby. It would be something that somebody built, and it's just dilapidated now because the community didn't really think they needed it, so it just went to waste.
Yeah. So and just like working, like you're saying, we learned the importance of working directly with the leaders of the community to find out what they actually needed, and they'll tell you what they need, and so don't just like go there telling them what you think they need.
They're also, it's not like just by virtue of being in the U.S. and being born somewhere like the U.S., we know what their problems are and they don't. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, well, your problems, you have a corrupt government, and they go, oh, okay, that's what it is. We'll address that. It's like they are aware of the problems that they're having, and I think maybe I didn't internalize that as much before having gone to the Peace Corps. I was just like, well, they got these problems. Maybe somebody just needs to explain to them what their problems are, and that'll help them.
Yeah.
Like they already know what their problems are.
Yeah.
They already know what the issues are. And it feels silly saying that out loud, but I think I kind of felt that way.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sort of embarrassingly, I feel like I think they just didn't know what the issue is.
Yeah.
It took a learned gentleman like yourself to go over there and share this knowledge with them.
Yeah.
Which I think is, I don't know, kind of what a lot of people might think before they go. So.
Yeah. I don't know if it's like you consciously think that. It's like a self-consciously you think that.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think you don't necessarily go around spouting that before you go.
Yeah.
But maybe that's, if you had to write a essay question, it would come out that way.
Yeah. I think like all my experiences in the Peace Corps have helped me at this point connect the dots between like everything that happens around the world. Like while we were there, we learned a lot about the Democratic Republic of the Congo and how like they have a lot of history of exploitation by foreign governments and foreign companies with their like diamonds and their minerals and all of that. And then now learning that they have like this years long genocide of people there in the Congo being killed for are being exploited in mines for these cobalt and things like that. It's like, oh, I learned about that while I was there. It's just at the time I didn't fully understand it, but now I can like connect dots, I guess, because I was in a country where there were these foreign companies that were exploiting the diamonds in Lesotho, and it's like I
Yeah.
saw that in person. Same with like we talked about the textile industry. So yeah.
I think I kind of found that there's some continuity among everyone in the world. Like people that like soccer will wear soccer jerseys, talk about soccer and play soccer, and just like other soccer fans around the world. And my mom was a school teacher, and the school teachers I were around kind of reminded me of my mom's friends in some way. So I kind of started seeing people more in those sorts of groups rather than dividing them up by the country or their race or ethnicity or whatever. I just see people more as soccer fans or teachers or whatever. People that like math and science are all kind of, there's sort of a bit of a subculture that sort of transcends nationality.
Yeah.
Well, okay, thank you. I think that's going to do it. I'm listening to you. I always do, but in particular, I think today, that was, your comments were very incisive, and I think that this interview will wind up at the same place